We are live on a Monday here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. I am your host, Mike Gill. Josh Henning is producing today's show. You out there, what's the word, my friends? A Eagles bye week was still a busy day. We'll dive into all of what happened, what it meant, the domino effects of Week 14 in the NFL. Also, we've got some Sixers news today regarding one Ben Simmons. And then, of course, all of the particulars in Week 14 of the NFL. If you want the Ben Simmons news, you got to have it right now. You can go to our website, 97.3ESPN.com. He did not get traded, but as you can surmise, the date of December 15th is Wednesday, which means teams are doing their due diligence, and they are picking up the phone, and they are calling the Philadelphia 76ers about one Ben Simmons. All right, let's get into what happened in Week 14, because obviously it was a mess of things that happened yesterday. Now, we typically will tell you on Friday's show who you're rooting for each week. You know, if you're an Eagles fan and you're trying to get into the playoffs, which teams you need help from to kind of get you in there. Well, Thursday night it started. You needed Minnesota. They didn't help. I mean, you needed Pittsburgh. They didn't help you. You needed the Jets to beat the Saints. That didn't go your way. Not even close. The Saints just pummel-jacked the Jets. You needed Houston to beat Seattle. That didn't go your way. You needed the Bengals to beat the Niners. That didn't happen. And it would have been nice if I guess that was the only other one. No, I said the 49ers. And then, of course, Dallas and Washington. And, I mean, depending on what your true realistic goals were, you were kind of rooting for Dallas yesterday. It was fun to see Dallas almost let that game slip away late in the game. But what you needed to have happen happened in that game yesterday. But because of what else happened, nobody else really won or nobody else really lost that you needed to lose, which means not that Philadelphia got hurt on Sunday. They just didn't move. I mean, they started the day at 9. They didn't move from 9. But if you look at the NFC playoff schedule right now, or the standings right now, you're going to see only one little change. San Francisco won, which is interesting because now San Francisco is over 500. They are 7-6. They are all alone in the 6th spot. The number 7 seed currently is Washington. They are 6-7. Minnesota is 6-7. Philadelphia is 6-7. Atlanta is 6-7. New Orleans is 6-7. But here's the other part of this, my friends. Carolina's 5-8. I don't think Carolina's really in this thing. But Seattle won again, and they are 5-8. And they are now just a game out of the playoff spot. You know, that Seattle team, all of a sudden, Russell Wilson's back. He wasn't playing very well when he first got back. Now, I get it. They beat the Texans yesterday, but they beat the 49ers last week. And if they win a game again next week coming up against the Rams, you're going to have to start taking that team a little bit more serious, because when you have Russell Wilson and the way Lockett's been going, and keep in mind, you know, DK Metcalf hasn't done much recently. If they can get him kind of going, that would be the Seattle Seahawks. That would give you what? You've got Washington, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 teams at 6-7, 2 teams at 5-8, and 1 team at 7-6. This thing is going to be wild and crazy. San Francisco wins yesterday in overtime. And really, Cincinnati should have won that game. I mean, my God, that game, the 49ers back and forth, overtime. Cincinnati really should have won that game. Washington just got out. They just were simply early in that game. They gave up 2 defensive touchdowns in the game. Their offense just could not get it done. The Dallas defense was outstanding yesterday. You got to give Dallas credit. They were outstanding defensively yesterday. And Micah Parsons is just a one-man wrecking crew. When they have Gregory and Parsons, when they've got that whole crew of guys going, they're pretty good. You can't depend on Gregory a lot. That's been part of his problem over the years. But when he's on the field, and who am I missing? Lawrence. When they've got Gregory and Lawrence and Parsons, and then, of course, Diggs in the secondary, when they've got that crew going, they're pretty good. The problem that Dallas has right now is what's up with Dak Prescott, what's happening there. Offensively, I wasn't all that impressed with them yesterday, but they did what they had to do. They've now widened their lead in the division, and then all the talk about the division should be over with. Dallas is going to win the East. Washington falls to 6-7. Now, people, they have the tiebreaker. Now, this is, are you ready for this? This is like biblical of why Washington has the tiebreakers right now. Because, look, there's 5 teams at 6-7. So how they determine how Washington beats out Minnesota, Philadelphia, Atlanta, and New Orleans, here you go. Ready? They win the tiebreaker over Atlanta and Minnesota based on best win percentage in conference games. Division tiebreaker was initially used to eliminate Philadelphia. Washington wins the tiebreaker over Philly based on win percentage in the division. The division tiebreaker was initially used to eliminate New Orleans because Atlanta won the tiebreaker over New Orleans based on head-to-head win percentage. Got all that? Good. That's why that's why Washington currently is the leader in the wild card. They are the current number 7 seed. Minnesota is the next team at 6-7. Why? Let me come up for air. All right, here we go. They win the tiebreaker over Philadelphia based on best win percentage in common games. They win the tiebreaker over Atlanta based on best win percentage in conference games. The division tiebreaker was used to eliminate New Orleans because Atlanta, again, has the head-to-head tiebreaker over New Orleans. So that puts Minnesota number 8 because they own the tiebreaker over Philly. As we know, Philadelphia owns the tiebreakers over New Orleans and Atlanta, and that's why they are currently number 9. Atlanta is number 10 because they own the tiebreakers over New Orleans because they have beaten them. And New Orleans is number 11. Carolina has the tiebreaker over Seattle based on win percentage in conference games. They are 3-6. Seattle is 2-6. Holy moly. And then Seattle is number 13. That is a wild, wild NFC. And this is all for really, you could say there's 2 playoff spots up for grabs, number 6 and number 7. But my gosh, San Francisco has to feel a hell of a lot better being a game up on that 5 teams. Could you imagine if Cincinnati won that game yesterday? It would have dropped San Francisco to 6-7, and they would have been the 6th team at 6-7 yesterday.
And you could argue that was one of San Francisco's worst games of the year because Jimmy G didn't play that great. They got a bogus call on the end of the first half of the game, and the Bengals bengled at times in that game. So, they were very fortunate they were playing Cincinnati and not, somebody else.
Yeah, look, Cincinnati, I thought, should have won the game. They just, as you said, they bungled the game yesterday. San Francisco, to me, and I've had them in as a playoff team the last couple of weeks. I like them the most at the beginning of the year in that division. They've had a lot of injuries. The quarterback play has been so shoddy for them. But I still like San Francisco as the number 6 seed. But as the number 7 seed, man, this thing is so up in the air. The Washington game yesterday, Prescott did his best to let Washington win that game. How does he throw that interception? Holy mackerel, that was awful.
I have no idea what he was looking at.
I
literally watched the replay trying to understand what he was throwing.
I watched the first half on TV, and I watched enough to say, okay, I feel pretty confident that Washington is just not good enough.
Right.
So I left, and I was listening to the game on the radio, and of course, as soon as I turned the game on the radio, what happens? It's like fourth quarter, and Washington scores a touchdown, and then they get the interception return for a touchdown, like within 2 minutes. I was like, holy mackerel, is Dallas really going to hand this game over to Washington? In the end, if you're an Eagles fan and you want to make the playoffs, you wanted Dallas to win that game yesterday.
Right.
That was really the only game that went your way yesterday, because everything else just look. I don't want to say it's the only thing that went your way. Yeah, it's the only thing that went your way to not make it such a mess. But the Eagles do have a lot of tiebreakers on the team behind them. The problem is they've got problems with Minnesota. They've got problems. It depends. Look, the Washington game this week is really the season. I don't want to say it's because if you lose, you're still in it. But man, you
The
are
uphill battle
essentially
even more.
Yeah. If you lose the game, you're only going to be a game back, but you're really going to have to win. I think the Eagles are going to have to go 3-1 to feel safely in this thing.
Which of the games that didn't go the Eagles game was, you think, more of a negative? Was it San Francisco? Was it the Vikings on Thursday?
Oh, it was the Minnesota game on Thursday night.
Okay.
The Minnesota game on Thursday night's the one, because San Francisco beat you head-to-head too. So they're already in. But I feel like San Francisco is going to kind of win that 6th spot. It's the fact now that Minnesota also has a tiebreaker over you. If they would have lost that game, they're 5-8. You have a game up on them. And so to answer your question, Minnesota winning Thursday night, I feel like made it more difficult for Philadelphia to get in, because now you're really competing with 3 teams instead of 2.
Okay, yeah. Because now you're really having to hope for certain things to happen.
Well, you have tie-breaking problems against San Francisco. I mean, no problem. They beat you head-to-head. I mean, that's simple. You're tied with them. Now, you can overcome the Minnesota tie-breaking problem.
Right.
Because that's a common game situation. So you can essentially, I guess, I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. We have to look at the common games moving forward here. Is common games ahead of conference? Because they're both 4-4 in the conference.
Let me double check that.
Because I think conference, I would imagine the conference record is ahead of common games, for God's sakes. Common games sounds like that sounds like you're going way down the list of tie-breaking situations to get there. But I would think that the conference games is where Philadelphia could overtake Minnesota, because they all have only conference games left.
Common games are 1 ahead of conference.
So common games is actually ahead of conference.
Common is 3, conference is 4.
Wow, why? That's bizarre to me. I thought the conference thing was like the most important, that in your division. Well, head-to-head.
But apparently when they changed it to 7 games, this is what the NFL has listed now.
All right, well, then that's a problem, because I don't know what common games that Philadelphia and Minnesota still have left on the docket here, because I think we did this last week, and Minnesota, I think, has you by like 1 game. It depends. I think when we did this last week, Josh, I want to say that if Philadelphia beats Dallas, that they would be tied in the common game. And then you might have to go to the conference situation.
Well, because right now, remember, Dallas beat Minnesota. That was
correct. But if
Philly
beats Dallas, I think we saw that it was like 3-3 Minnesota and Philadelphia 2-3. So if Philadelphia beats Dallas, that then they would both be 3-3 in common games. And then you would go to your conference record, which right now for both of them is 4-4.
Right.
So these last 4 games for both of these teams could really be the separator in what happens here. So right now, Minnesota has the tiebreaker. What's Minnesota's record look like the rest of the way here? They've got the Bears. Bears actually showed up last night.
They did.
I did a same game parlay. I did 9 things in the same game parlay. I hit 8 of them. You know which one I didn't get?
What?
First team to score.
Oh.
The Bears scored first.
I mean, if you just wouldn't have taken that bet, you would have won the parlay.
Exactly. I would have got 8 out of 8. Instead, I got 8 out of 9. And it was first team to score a touchdown. The Bears kicked a field goal.
Right.
They were up 3-0. And I figured, okay, no big deal. Green Bay will answer. Bears are up 10-0 in the game last night. I said, this damn same game parlay's over before the freaking quarter's over. And every other thing that I hit,
bang,
bang. Yep. So they play at the Bears. They play the Rams, at the Packers, and the Bears again. I could see them being a 2-2, although they did beat Green Bay. Green Bay's going to need that game. It's at Green Bay. I think Minnesota has 2-2 kind of written, and possibly they're no gimme to sweep the Bears either. Minnesota has been one of those teams that they lose to the Lions, they beat the Packers.
They're 3-3 in common opponents with the Eagles.
Minnesota.
Yes.
Right, and Philadelphia is 2-3.
Because they won and lost to the Lions. The Vikings lost to the 49ers. The Vikings beat the Chargers. The Vikings lost to the Cowboys.
Right. That's why I said Philadelphia plays Dallas. That game there might be a huge game in the tie-breaking scenario.
Absolutely.
Man, can you imagine if Dallas is going to win the division? It comes down to Philadelphia plays Dallas, and they need to win the game to get in and win the tiebreaker against Minnesota. Because if Minnesota goes 3-1, they both go 3-1, nothing will change in the tie-breaking scenario.
Right.
Because nothing will change in the tie-breaking scenario until Philly plays Dallas, because Minnesota did not play the Giants and Minnesota did not play Washington.
And don't forget the Dallas situation. They still may be playing for something as well.
Hold on, though. If Philly beats Dallas and they let's say Minnesota and Philadelphia both go 3-1, okay? They would put them both at 9-8. Yes. They would then both be 3-3 in the common games.
Correct.
They would also then be tied in the conference. They're both 4-4. If they go 3-1 over their next 4 games, they're going to be 7-5 in the conference. So then what? What's the next tiebreaker?
Strength of victory.
Strength of victory. All right.
Is that where the plus minus comes in?
No, the strength of victory for Philadelphia is currently 365. Minnesota's is 462. Minnesota has a big advantage in the strength of victory. They beat Green Bay, who has 10 wins.
Okay.
And Philadelphia's best win so far this year has come against they beat Denver with 7 wins.
Right.
They beat
Atlanta.
They beat Atlanta with 6 wins. They beat New Orleans with 6. They beat Carolina with. So, yeah, Minnesota has a significant lead. Could you imagine if it comes down to the strength of victory? Now, the next couple of weeks here, if Philly goes 3-1, their best win would come against Dallas. That could help their strength of victory, but I don't think it's going to top beating Green Bay.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. That could be a real gut punch.
So really, you need Minnesota to lose somewhere along the way.
Sure. I mean, you do not want to end up tied with Minnesota. That's what I'm getting from this. Because not only would you lose the tiebreaker, you would lose the tiebreaker so far down the line that it would be just like, are you kidding me?
And there are 2 legit chances that Minnesota can lose. Because
yes, Minnesota's schedule is definitively more difficult than Philadelphia's is.
Because they got to play the Rams, and the Rams are playing themselves to make sure they get to the postseason.
Rams are currently 8-4. They are 2 games back of Arizona in the West, so they got a long shot there, and they're 2 games up on San Francisco in the wild card race. So the Rams look pretty locked into 5 right now.
But considering this is going to be not the end of the season, I don't think the Rams are going to be resting guys, in week, what is this? Was that week 16?
No, I don't think Minnesota, I don't think LA has any reason to be resting guys in that game.
Right. So then the next week, Minnesota has to go to Green Bay. And the Packers will be looking for revenge.
Oh, the Packers and the Packers are still in play for the 1 seed. They're only a half a game back for that. I mean, depending on if Arizona loses tonight and the Rams win, keep in mind they play tonight, that would only have the Rams a game back of the West.
Right.
So the Rams game against Minnesota is going to be going to be meaningful.
It's a 3-way fist fight right now for the top of the NFC right now between Arizona, Tampa, thanks to their win yesterday, and Green Bay.
Yeah. Robin Margate, Mike, the officiating in this league is horrendous. I believe the refs have too much impact on the outcome of games. Shouldn't be that way. Frustrating for an NFL fan. Rob, you're absolutely right. I mean, look, I'm one of those people like I can't blame the officials because I go in knowing they're so bad.
Mm-hmm.
They're an embarrassment. And I said this years ago. People mocked me and laughed at me and yada yada, and I don't care. People acted like when the referees went on strike, when they came back, people treated them coming back like they were the Messiah, for God's sakes. I advocated at that time to let those freaking guys sit out because they stink. And that you could have got new, young officials and molded them to referee these games the way you want it. The game is too fast for these guys. And they're stuck in their old ways. There's too many rules for them. They should have never caved into these officials when they did. And they have a horrible product for a multi-billion-dollar industry to have these clowns week in and week out. That game last night, Tampa Bay and Buffalo, was an extreme embarrassment. Extreme embarrassment, the way that game was officiated. And every single week, I hear people, oh, the referees are against my team. No, they're not against your team. They just suck. They're not against your team. They're horrible. They're horrible for your team. They're horrible for my team. They're horrible for everybody's team in the listening audience. No official is against your team. You're giving them too much credit. Right. To say that the official is making a call to stick it to your team, you're giving them too much credit. You're letting them off the hook. They're not trying to screw your team. They just suck. They're an embarrassment. They are an utter embarrassment. I'm not the guy who says you got to get rid of the umpires in baseball. Like, I like the human element of the games. Umpiring's a little – these officials are so bad. I don't know who's worse, the NFL guys or the NBA.
Oh, that's a coin flip.
The NBA, the games are just too fast for these guys. It's too fast. Things happen, and you're just literally, it's a split-second whistle blow. Boop. Guy drives to the hoop. Whoop. It's so bad sometimes. But in the NFL, it is so bad. It doesn't affect your team. It affects everybody's team. That's how bad they are. They're an embarrassment to a multi-billion-dollar industry. It is sad to watch what happens every Sunday. So, Rob and Margate, yes, I feel your pain, but I'm numb to it now. I'm numb to it. I'm not the guy that'll sit there and be like, the referee screwed my team. That's for crybabies and losers. They're not out for your team. They suck for every team. And one week it might affect your team. One week it might affect the other team. I mean, holy mackerel, that game was so bad last night or yesterday, whatever. Like, the game's at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's freaking dark out. So it feels like it's a Sunday night game when you're watching the 4:25. Right. Mike, if the Eagles-Dallas was that put them at 4-0 the last 4. I can't read that.
Please stop doing the voice talk to text.
He says, are we just saying they're going to beat Washington and the Giants? Right. Obviously, if the Eagles, for the game against Dallas to mean anything, you would have to get to 3-1, you would have to, well, no. If the Eagles were 3-1, they would have lost a game to either Washington or the Giants and beat Dallas.
Right.
Yeah.
Unless you're saying
unless they beat those three and
then
lose to Dallas, but then they would lose the tiebreaker to Minnesota on common games.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a scenario where that doesn't come into play, but again, we're talking about there being multiple scenarios, so we understand it's a little confusing.
609-403-0973. The text board's open. 609-403-0973. Text board. If you're listening on the free mobile app, you can message us through the phone. Sports Bash is brought to you by Matt Blatt Kia. They want to get you approved today. Matt Blatt, 6211 Blackhorse Pike, Egg Harbor Township. And, of course, if you're watching the show live, you can message us on the video stream. I'll get to Greg, some of your comments over there. Jeff, I see you watching the show. If you're out there watching the show, we appreciate you live on our YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com and just search 97.3 ESPN. You can watch the show live, see all the guests, and we'll put the video comments up on the screen. Greg puts this out there. Dallas are unlikely to play starters. In Week 18, yeah, that game could mean nothing for Dallas.
Or it could not.
We'll go through some scenarios. This is fun. All right, coming up, Sports Bash. Ben Simmons news. He is the hottest name on the NBA trade market. How many teams are reported to be interested? Find out next. 231 Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Mike McGarry joins us in about 10 minutes from now. Scott Grayson as well. Ben Simmons, his name came up today. Came up on Friday. Josh has the details from Woj in a story over at 97.3ESPN.com. But today over at The Athletic, basically Ben Simmons' mouthpiece began to speak, which included 7 teams that are said to be interested in Ben Simmons' services. Now, there is some validity that the trade talks would heat up, as Woj reported on Friday, along with Zach Lowe of ESPN, which essentially is on Wednesday, 84% of NBA players can now be traded starting Wednesday. Right now, I think it's only 65% that can be traded. So you will have a 20% more of the population able to be moved. Now, the Simmons-Sixers standoff, as we know, he has not played. He has basically not done anything to this point. He's shown up here. He's shown up there. He's been fined. He's been not fined. He got fined again. He doesn't travel. He doesn't practice. We don't know what Simmons is doing. But apparently, according to Shams Charania of The Athletic, he has become the hottest name on the trade market. Now, if you look at it from this vantage point, 7 teams, Shams reports, now have interest in a Philadelphia 76ers trade. They are the New York Knicks, the LA Lakers, the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Portland Trail Blazers, the Sacramento Kings, the Indiana Pacers, and the Cleveland Cavaliers, he say, are among the teams. So he is essentially saying these are some new teams that they now know are renewing trade discussions or have entered the trade. So he's saying among the teams, that's 7 teams right there. We know the Sixers want a star. Do any of the 7 teams I mentioned have a star that would make sense in swapping? Well, the Knicks don't seem to have one, right?
Well, first of all, I would ask, what do you define as a star? Because first of all, Woj's report said a top 25 type player.
Mm-hmm.
But some people, can be guys who are top 25 who other people are like, that's not a real star.
Well, I'll tell you what. I saw the Knicks are interested in moving Kevin Knox. He would not be deemed a star, though I would
Absolutely
have interest
not.
in him.
I would have zero interest in him.
Really?
He's been an absolute busteroni.
Well, he was a busteroni in New York. They don't use him. He played the other night. They let him play for 1 game. He scored 19 points.
Yeah, but who is that against, though?
It doesn't matter. He scored 19 points in the NBA.
A lot of guys can score 19 points.
It's not like you're playing against the Jets.
Data Barrow scored how many points in the game?
Yeah, I'm talking, but he could be out in the court and score nothing. You say a lot of guys score points. There's a lot of players that go out in the court when they get an opportunity and don't do a damn thing.
Sure.
I mean, Knox was a lottery pick. I think the Knicks have just completely misused him.
I can agree with that.
He's not a good defensive player. That's why he doesn't fit with this Knicks team. But he can shoot and he can score.
Well, we don't need another poor defender.
No, but I'll tell you what, to me, not for Ben Simmons. I'm not trading for Ben Simmons straight up. That's not what I'm saying. But if you wanted to get rid of him and include him in a deal, I'd be interested in taking him on and having him in my stable of players. That's all.
He piqued your curiosity. Is that fair to say?
That was the guy. What year did he get drafted? 2 years ago? 3 years ago?
I think 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah, I know you were in love with him.
I was a big Kevin Knox guy. He is a player that I just can't understand why the Knicks have not given him a shot to play. It just, to me, doesn't make a lot of sense. But he was drafted 3 years ago. He scored 13 points a game as a rookie. And they didn't use him. After that, he started 57 games that year, scored 13 points a game in 29 minutes. The next year, he played 4 games. He started 4 games, and last year he started 0 games. I mean, I don't know. He's shooting 39% from 3 this year. No, last year he shot 39% from 3.
He hasn't really played much this year. So.
No, that's what I'm saying. I don't understand. But look, I'm not saying trade him straight up, but I'm just saying he's one of the names the Knicks said that they're willing to move. Great. The other 2 names, the Lakers, they don't got a guy I want.
No, now
Lakers make no sense.
Right. I would like to preface our conversation by saying, let's remember, as Woj and Zach Lowe report on Friday, and as when we talked to Scoop B on my show on Tuesday from Bally Sports, they have all said that the teams that are being mentioned are not one-for-one trades with the Sixers. That these are 3-4 team scenarios, and you need these extra teams involved to make the money work.
Right. The Knicks,
For-
the Lakers.
Like they're not the teams that might get Ben Simmons, but they're the teams that might have a player or two like Kemba Walker, for
But
example.
according to Shams, they're the teams that are interested in Simmons. So the Lakers want to end up with Simmons. The question is, the Sixers might say, if you want Simmons, you need to find us another team because you got nothing we want.
Right. And that's why, for example, when you look at the Lakers roster, there might not be a guy right now that you're like, that guy is a guy we want, but there might be somebody on the Lakers roster who has a contract that can match with somebody else.
Yeah, the Knicks don't really have a guy that fits the bill of what the Sixers want. Minnesota, I mean, I don't really see a guy.
There's one guy. It's Anthony Edwards.
Well, if they're going to trade Anthony Edwards, you take that.
Minnesota needs to make a decision now because Karl-Anthony Towns over the weekend started complaining to the media about the situation. And you want to keep that guy happy. If he's the center of your team that Mark Lore and Alex Rodriguez want to build around, you got to make a tough decision.
Well, they've got Karl-Anthony Towns, former number 1 overall pick.
Right.
D'Angelo Russell, former number 2 overall pick.
Right.
Anthony Edwards, number 1 overall pick, and they still can't get out of their own way.
Right, which is why you need to make a decision.
Maybe Karl-Anthony Towns isn't all that good.
Maybe he's not, but you got to make a decision. Who are you going to build around,
Right.
Edwards or Cat?
Portland, we know that situation. They don't really have a guy the Sixers are going to take.
No, and the guy that probably gets moved at this point, I'm going to theorize, based on everything I've read and heard, is they want to dump Nurkic's contract on somebody.
Sixers don't need that contract.
Guys, you don't want Nurkic, period.
No. Sacramento, we know the particulars. De'Aaron Fox would be the guy. Buddy Hield's name has come up.
Right.
Indiana's looking to move Sabonis, Miles Turner, maybe Karis LeVert.
Now, if you end up with any of those guys, like LeVert or Sabonis, great. But what are you giving up in return?
Cleveland, when they lost Sexton, that kind of moved them out of the mix a little bit. So that'll be an interesting one. But they are the teams. Now, the Knicks, we mentioned the Knicks too. I mean, I don't know. They've got Barrett, Quickly. Who's the guy from Dayton?
Oh, Obi Toppin.
Obi Toppin. You know, those guys.
But as you said before, the Sixers aren't interested in acquiring just random dudes.
No. But more details on our website, 97.3ESPN.com. Ben Simmons, hottest name on the trade market right now. How about that?
He should be.
Well, Wednesday's the day that something could finally, I don't think it will, but that's the day that it's more realistic because it helps the Sixers too. They can include guys in trade too, like Furkan Korkmaz, who got a new deal. He can't be traded today, but he can be traded on Wednesday.
Maybe Niang, you throw him into a deal if you need to.
Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. Mike McGarry will talk about that, the weekend that was in the NFL, and more here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Coming up tonight at 4:40, it's the return of Paul Hudrick. He had a baby. Paul Hudrick and his wife had a baby. So he'll be back with our Inside the Sixers. He was off the last couple of weeks. He'll be back tonight to talk more about that Simmons stuff at 4:40. All right, 245, Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City, brought to you by Calvi Electric, now offering residential services for your home and business. Visit them online at calvielectric.com. The weekend look back here, NFC East seems to be locked up here with a Dallas win over Washington. Giants, that was pretty heinous yesterday. What's going on, Mike? How are you?
Pressing is actually more like it. I mean, I didn't, I watched the Dallas-Washington game yesterday. Then I went out and did a couple errands, came back to the house about throw on the Giant game here. Let me see. Maybe this game is close. Maybe the Giants are surprising me. And I turned it on, and the score was 30-7 Chargers. So, and I turned it right off. So it's right over to Tampa Bay Buffalo at that point. So, depressing when it comes to the Giants.
Yeah, that was a ugly performance by them yesterday. Pretty good performance by the Chargers. That was nice win for them. They needed it. Dallas wins yesterday. So we assume now that the East is done?
Yeah, I do. I mean, Dallas is at 9-4 right now. 4 games left. I don't think any team in the NFC East can match them. But if I'm Dallas, however, I'm concerned. Dak Prescott has not looked right. I think I've said this before. Since he hurt his calf against the New England Patriots in that game, whatever that was, week 4 or 5, he has not looked right. Their offense does not this season. I heard you talking before. Their defense is tremendous. I mean, the Parsons kid is just tremendous and makes play after play, but they are not getting good play out of Dak Prescott. He plays like he's 40 years old now. He doesn't run anymore. His throws are inaccurate. He just has not looked right since he hurt that calf against the New England Patriots. And that if I'm a Cowboy fan, that's a big concern for me.
All right, Mike, look at right now the NFC wildcard race. San Francisco won, so they're 7-6. And then you have 5 teams, all 6-7. Washington, Minnesota, Philadelphia, Atlanta, New Orleans. And then you have 2 teams 5-8, Carolina and Seattle. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams within 1 game of each other, or 5 that are tied for the 7th spot. 4 games left to go. Which team do you feel will be the number 7 seed in the NFC?
Well, I think out of that group right there, I think the number 7 seed out of that group is going to be the team that finishes second in the NFC East, basically. So I think that's either Washington or Philadelphia. And if I'm Philadelphia, I think this is a must-win for them this Sunday coming up against Washington. If you do the math, if they lose here and Washington goes to 7-7 and Philadelphia goes to 6-8, and you look at the division tiebreakers and the conference tiebreakers, Philadelphia is really behind the 8 ball. So I think that number 7 seed comes from the second place team in the NFC East. And if I'm Philadelphia, I believe you have to win this Sunday to stay in contention. Because if you drop to 6-8 and you drop a game behind Washington, a game behind them in division tiebreakers, Washington, the sneaky thing about Washington is their conference record is really good. They've lost most of their games to AFC teams. I think they're 5-3 in the conference.
Yes.
So this is a big game for Philadelphia. If they want to make the playoffs, they have to win this Sunday, I believe.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, unless Philadelphia goes 3-1 down the stretch, the problem is if they go 3-1 and Minnesota goes 3-1, Minnesota's got all sorts of wonky tiebreakers. They have like common games, strength of victory, like all sorts of weird stuff. So it seems that Philly is going to have to get away, separate themselves from Minnesota somehow. And to do so, they're going to have to beat Washington twice and essentially make the game against Dallas mean nothing. If they can get 3-0 in that game against Dallas, that might be enough.
Yeah, what's going to end up, the game that Philadelphia, if they don't make the playoffs, they're going to be kicking themselves about is the loss to the Giants. That's going to be the killer. That's the killer loss right now. That's why they have to win this Sunday. That loss to the Giants right now is the one that's going to, really, cause the Philadelphia to look back and say, boy, we missed an opportunity there.
Brutal. Mike, I want to get your take. 2 days from now, the NBA, 84% of players will be able to be traded. There's a report today that says Ben Simmons is the hottest name on the trade market. Are you buying that, or is that Rich Paul going to his boy Shams Charania again?
Probably a little bit of both. When I see the 7 teams that are mentioned in that story, I look at that as a list of Ben Simmons telling the Sixers, these are the 7 teams I wouldn't mind going to, basically. That's what I see that proactively. Hey, look, the market has to heat up eventually, not only because of the, as you mentioned before, the December 15th, more players are being able to trade it, but the Sixers have got to come to some sort of point here where they can't go the whole season with getting nothing out of that spot, basically. And you see some, movement, some reports out of Brooklyn now that maybe the Nets are going to let Kyrie Irving play on the road, maybe because teams are coming to realization we can't have a guy that we're paying $30 million a year. We cannot not play that guy or not get anything out of his spot.
Well, here's the thing, Mike, with the Kyrie. I mean, I guess Kyrie figured as the season went on, his chances would be better, that they would just wait, but now it looks worse. Starting next month, you're going to have to prove that you're vaccinated to go to the Sixers game. So it seems that that's not going to loosen up maybe this year at all for Kyrie.
Yeah, he kind of bet that maybe the pandemic was going to get better and some of these rules or regulations were going to be lifted, and they're clearly not going to be lifted this season. You're talking about in New York, too, they're talking about an indoor mask mandate there, too. So they're not going to ease up on any of these regulations. And maybe he thought, look, the pandemic will lessen and these regulations will ease. You also have the thing now where in the NBA, you can't travel to Toronto if you're unvaccinated because you can't get back in the country or something like that. So there's going to be more and more regulations going forward, I believe, or the ones that are currently in place are not going to be eased. But I think teams are looking. Look, the Sixers had a nice win the other night over Golden State. Matisse Thybulle played great defense. Embiid has picked it up. He's playing better offensively. They're 15-12. You can't look at Joel Embiid and say, look, we're not going to get anything for Ben Simmons and we're not going to try to improve that spot. And basically we're going to throw the year away. You just can't do that you maybe can do that with a 21-year-old Joel Embiid. You can't do that with a 27, 28-year-old Joel Embiid.
Well, I was going to say Saturday night, that was probably the best game they've played all year. And you wonder, what do you take from that game? Hey, they win this game against Golden State without Ben Simmons. Hey, does that say, look, when they play their best, even without him, that they're among the best? I mean, does that put them in title contender? I know record-wise, no, but do you look at that and say, maybe?
Not to me, as they're presently constituted. When I look at that, I think they just kind of present a unique matchup problem because I don't think there might not be a person in the NBA who's better equipped or does a better job of defending Steph Curry than Matisse Thybulle. So it's almost like these Sixers have this secret weapon to sort of neutralize Golden State's secret weapon. But the problem is, they're only going to play Golden State twice a year. I don't think they're ever going to they're not going to meet them in the NBA final the way they're presently constituted right now. So I look at that as maybe the Sixers just have a unique matchup against Golden State that they're able to take advantage of. But overall, I don't think the win puts them in as a championship contender. I look more at, the game against Utah and how Utah kind of rolled them as kind of seeing where the Sixers are as far as the upper echelon of the NBA team.
All right, Mike McGarry, by the way, high school basketball tips off this weekend, right?
Yeah, we're making the transition right now. Actually, that's why I'm out on the road today visiting a couple of schools, getting ready for our basketball preview that starts, this weekend. Season starts Friday night. Great event in Ocean City Saturday and Sunday. Our friend Tom Williams with the Ocean City PBA tip-off weekend. Some great games over there. St. Augustine, Lower Cape May, Egg Harbor Township, Wildwood Catholic, St. Joe, Atlantic City. So it's a whirlwind, and it all starts this Friday after we make our transition this past weekend. After we had our football all-stars in the paper this past weekend. Season's blending together, Mike. No rest. Take a breath and keep going.
Yeah, basketball's back, and obviously Mike's all over that. We'll talk to him Wednesday. Eagles and Washington, big one. This is the biggest Eagles-Washington game in some time. I mean, boy, this is Washington's always kind of like the team in the NFC East, but, man, they're a big factor right now, and the buzz for this game should be interesting come this weekend. All right, Mike, we'll talk to you Wednesday, pal.
All right, we'll see you down the road. Thanks.
There's Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City. He was kind enough to join us here, and he is brought to you by Calvi Electric, now offering residential services for your home and business. Visit them online, calvieelectric.com. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash. All right, coming up, Scott Grayson's going to talk a little Eagles at the bye week. Grayson's grades at the bye. We'll get his thoughts on this Birds team, what he saw from Washington yesterday, what this NFC East or this NFC wild card picture, which of the teams in the wild card race worries him the most. We got all that coming up on the other side. Your text messages 609 403 0973 609 403 0973. If you're listening on the free mobile app, you can message us through your phone. We'll read those off as well, of course. And those of you who are watching on our live YouTube stream, leave a comment in the comments section, and we will address that coming up. All right, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. Grayson's grades. No game to grade. We're just going to kind of chop up Eagles, wild card, NFC East, get Grayson's thoughts on this team at the bye week. And now moving forward, he'll have Grayson's grades after Eagles football team. They play on Sunday at 1 right here on 97.3 ESPN. Hey, who knew the tickets we gave away at 99 bottles was going to be for maybe the most important game of the year? So that guy's going to be at the game. He's got great seats. We'll do Grayson's grades right now. Scott Grayson, Fox 29 and 97.3 ESPN.com's Grayson's grades. In fact, he's got to do it via the phone today because he's on his way up to Fox 29. You'll see him on your television tonight. You saw no Eagles on the TV yesterday, Scott, but we did see really a muddy water for the Eagles in this wild card race the rest of the way. They didn't really get a lot of help yesterday in any of the games around other than Dallas beating Washington.
Yeah, really, that's the only one they truly needed. I mean, they almost got a break with the Niners, but if you have your eyes set on potentially the number 6 seed, but the one they really needed, they got. And not only that, I mean, the injuries that Washington now has to keep an eye on are huge going into this game on Sunday as well as a result of what happened yesterday. So, yeah, I mean, they didn't get other results to bounce their way, but the one they got, I think, was a big one, along with that extra baggage that comes with it that will certainly play a role Sunday.
Yeah, you look at the game that hurt them was Thursday night against Minnesota. Minnesota's got all sorts of crazy tiebreakers against them. You mentioned San Francisco. It's really, to me, San Francisco, Minnesota, Washington, and Philly that are really in play for kind of these two spots. But it's really, this. How big is the Washington game this week? Do you look at this as you have to win this game if you want to make the playoffs?
I do, because it's at home and it'll take a little bit of the pressure off the return game down in Washington in a couple of weeks. So, yeah, to me, this is, but you look back and it's like you have that same thought about, wow, boy, if they would have beaten the New York Giants, how much less pressure is there? But every team could play the what-if game throughout the season. It's just the nature of what it is. And I think that, yeah, you have to win this game, but coming off the bye, you got your guys rested. From the coaching standpoint, you had an extra week to self-scout. You knew you were playing Washington. You have 2 weeks to prepare for them. If you do not come out and win this game, I think all the air kind of starts coming out of the balloon here a little bit. Certainly it's not all doom and gloom and they can recover, but you put yourself back into the corner that you finally just about gotten yourself out of.
Great point, Scott, when you talk about the fact that you got 2 weeks now to prepare for Washington. You got to see them play in this game recently, and, the injuries that they kind of ended up getting in the game really could be a factor. When you see what Washington did yesterday, what they didn't look like the same team yesterday that they had been in the 4-game win streak to get them to that point. That's for sure.
No, they didn't. And quite frankly, you mentioned about, the Eagles, like I had said about them having 2 weeks. Look, Dallas put a blueprint together in that first half of how to, absolutely, destroy and confuse and take advantage of Washington. I mean, Dallas was doing everything right on defense. Now, I know the Eagles don't have a Micah Parsons. So I'm not trying to say that they can exactly mirror that blueprint, but they showed you some things that you can do. And basically the biggest thing that I think the Eagles need to do is, and it's what we've been talking a lot about this season, just be aggressive against whoever plays quarterback. If Heineke can't go, then by all means you better harass Kyle Allen. And if Heineke can go, be aggressive. Look what the Cowboys were doing yesterday. A ton of stunts. They were disguising where they were blitzing from, and he didn't know what to do with the ball. And it made a huge difference in that game early on that Washington almost did, but was unable to come out, dig themselves out of. So, yeah, I think that this is going to be a huge game. I think this coaching staff is this is a show-me game for me in terms of the coaches. Like I said, you have these 2 weeks to prepare. Show me something. Show me an extra wrinkle. Show me something you put in this week, or show me something you saw that you're taking advantage of with your personnel. That's what I want to see on Sunday.
Yeah, that's a good point. Scott Grayson will do take a look at this team at the bye. Scott, we typically do Grayson's grades, and I want to take a look at Nick Sirianni through this 14 weeks of the season. You just said this is going to be a big game for him, but how would you kind of grade him? He's been such a up and down kind of guy. He had F's earlier. I mean, we did grades and said F for this guy. He has really turned the corner.
He really has. And I'm willing to admit that. Like you said, he was getting F's from me repeatedly because I couldn't figure out. I mean, he was walking around the sidelines like a bit of a buffoon. You couldn't figure out what he was doing or what the plan was. There was no identity for this team. We talked about that for a while. But look, when they found it, boy, he wrapped his both arms around it, and he has embraced the fact that this offensive line is dominating its battle up front, running behind those guys, letting them do what they do well. Also, and I don't think you can overlook this. He went to the well a couple of times where they were running that pick play. Touchdowns taken off the board as a result of the flags that came from it. And he said, I just got to throw it out of my playbook. I just have to. And that's hard to do when you have a play that's working and you're just not getting the calls right. I think Nick Sirianni has shown me a lot, especially in the last 6 to 7 weeks. As far as Jonathan Gannon, I'm still, I felt like he was turning a corner, and then that first half against the Jets made me think, boy, I'm not so sure. And now I don't really believe he's necessarily going to come out and be aggressive against Washington, but I'm hopeful he will. So it's still trying to figure out some of what these guys are. But in terms of coaches, I would give Nick Sirianni for what he has done to keep this team together. I was afraid that these guys were going to really start pointing fingers at each other after, the first 6 games or something like that went the way they did. But he's done a good job of keeping this team moving in the right direction. And like I said, really embracing what he's found to be their strengths on offense.
Yeah, the guy you mentioned, John Gannon, I feel like he's almost the most important guy the rest of the way here because I feel like I kind of know what they are offensively. I'm not sure what to expect from week to week, though, from John Gannon and his defense.
No, and you're exactly right about that. I don't think anybody knows what to expect and whether you're going to see a aggressive Gannon or passive Gannon. And that's going to be a little tough from the players' too perspective to kind of figure out, well, what are we going to be this week? Because I think these guys, they all want to be aggressive. They all want to go after the ball. They want to go make those big hits. They want to go get the quarterback. They want to force him to hurry his throws. And at times that's not the case. So it's got to be tough to play in that. At the same token, I think we've seen Gannon at times trying to gain more trust in his personnel and players to allow them a longer leash to go do the things that they want to do. But you're right. He is probably the most important part of whatever happens over these next 4 weeks, because I can tell you if they don't make the playoffs, I would bet that more often than not, it would be due to the play or the calling of the defense as opposed to the offense. So we got a lot we can watch. He's going to be under a microscope for sure. And so I think that should be very fascinating to see over these next 4 weeks as to how he approaches this from that. You look at it, and if they do get in the playoffs, Mike, they're going to face a really good quarterback. And this defense really has to build some positive momentum to go into a game like that with some sort of confidence, or it's over before it even starts.
Yeah, I think you start to look at playoff opponents, and you realize even if you make the playoffs, you're probably going to be a severe underdog. This season is about really taking that big step, going from a 4-win team to a playoff team. And you wonder, is this roster, Scott, we talk so much about Roseman and the job he's done and the lack of talent that they get in the draft. When you take an overview look at this roster, we do Grayson's grades. When you start to look at this roster, do we look at a roster that has talent moving forward? Is it just kind of like, are they a byproduct of the schedule? Like when you look at where this organization is, how would you kind of break that down?
I think they have pieces. They have building blocks. I don't think that they have I'm not willing to say they have star players right now. I don't think you have those guys that are going to be able to put a team on their back and collectively get you, on any kind of a 2017, 2018 or so playoff run that the Eagles had right now. But what I see that I didn't necessarily know that they had at the beginning of the season is the pieces in place to build around that. I could see this team, if they use their draft picks right, and I understand that's given Howie a lot of credit, really being in a place to continue to challenge for the division title next season. But they've got to use those draft picks right. I feel a lot more confident in the offense. They've got some free agency money they can spend. I'd like to see them add, another receiver opposite Devontae Smith. But obviously a lot of what they do in the draft, they need to get younger on defense, and they've got to build some pieces at the edge rush position to really force, some of these quarterbacks into some trouble. And those are the places where I think they've got their biggest needs. I feel so much better about this offensive line than I did at the beginning of the season, just because of particularly Mailata and Dickerson have really played well, impressively. And I think now you look at it and you say, hey, we've got some building blocks here to where this really wasn't much of a rebuild. There wasn't a bottom that they had to sit at for long. And I feel more optimistic about the future, but that also puts a lot of faith in Howie to not screw it up.
Well, I think, as we sit here, the biggest question moving forward would be the quarterback position. Because I think, look, you just said it. Your offensive line is pretty –
absolutely.
The offensive line is pretty solid. When you have that offensive line, you should be competitive. You should be good. But how good are you? That comes down to the QB, and they really need to figure out. And here's the question, Scott. You have 4 games left. Are these 4 games the be-all, end-all that you're going to get the answer that you feel comfortable with about the quarterback?
I don't expect them to be. I think you're still going to go into the offseason wondering what Jalen Hurts could be for you if he's the guy. Now, I think you can look at some things. You could say, well, I can definitely say that Jalen Hurts raised his trade value. Decide to move on around the league. I think there's teams that would consider taking him along with a couple of draft picks if it came to that. To where maybe you don't need to burn all 3 of your first-round picks if you wanted to move on. But that discussion, for I still feel this way. I think you have enough if you put around Jalen Hurts to continue to score on offense, and I would rather see them devote resources to being a lot better on defense to help your team win some games. Give yourself another year to decide if Jalen Hurts is your guy. Find a way to roll one of these draft picks forward into the first-round pick next year so that you buy yourself that insurance policy that you had this season, in a way, to get out from under it if you need to. But I think you can win with Jalen Hurts. Now, I don't know that you're going to win a Super Bowl with him, but I think if you put enough pieces around him, look what Micah Parsons has done for Dallas. Dak was not great yesterday. They won that game because of Micah Parsons in the defense, just building such a surpassable lead earlier in the game.
Yeah.
So to me, that's the formula I would follow. But, how he sees a shiny toy roll down the street, he thinks he can go and grab it. He'll do what it takes to try to find that thing, grab that toy with whatever he has to give up if he thinks it's shinier and more pretty than the one he's holding.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you that they have some foundation pieces. They just need to add some really shiny furniture. I don't think they need to go get this quarterback yet because, look, do I think Hurts is going to be a perennial Pro Bowler? He might be, in fact. Because he's going to put numbers up. You know what I'm saying? Like his numbers, he's a producer, but is he a big-time quarterback is the question. He's always going to produce numbers. He's going to throw for yards. He's going to run for yards. He's going to end up with a lot of touchdowns. I mean, you look at his numbers at the end of the day, you're like, my God, this guy produces. But in the grand scheme of things, does that mean he's the guy who wins the Super Bowl for you? Probably not. But I think what you said is right, Scott. If you just keep getting more and more and more talent around, that lessens what the quarterback has to mean. You know what I mean? Like, Nick Foles just has to be just Nick Foles for the day. He doesn't have to be that guy for 17 games over the course of a season. If you have enough talent around him. And I think that's where the Eagles should really go with this, is just keep stockpiling talent and don't try to hit the home run by swinging for some, for Russell Wilson or somebody.
I totally agree. And like, when you go to build a puzzle, there's all kinds of ways you can attack it. You and I won't do it the same way. But when you're putting those pieces in place, you look at what you have, and if you can, ultimately, you're going to complete that puzzle one way, whether you get that piece that is the quarterback this coming year, or whether you fix the rest of the puzzle and then you're waiting on that last piece and you come back and you put it in place. This team could still move forward. They can maybe win a playoff game or two next year if the chips fall the right way and Jalen Hurts continues to maybe make a couple of positive strides. And then you could come back later and say, listen, we could still upgrade at quarterback and be even better. And maybe that's the difference, putting that last piece in place to take this team where it needs to go.
Scott, I know that the Eagles are going to go with Hurts next week. I mean, obviously, that's not really a question here. But do you have a quick hook for him if he doesn't play well?
No, and here's the reason. My opinion is you're going to sink or swim with Jalen Hurts, and here's why. Because if you take him out, you have shown you learned nothing by what took place with Carson Wentz last year. You will have shaken his confidence. You will have he's got a strong presence in that locker room. He's got a lot of guys that believe in him. And if you shake that as well, you've now lost more players than just Jalen Hurts. On top of that, you will affect his trade value that I talked about before. So if you decide that you want to move on from him, you've now said to the rest of the league, we didn't think he was better than Gardner Minshew, so we've taken him out now. Well, now you've hurt yourself in that regard as well. So I think the only way you get him out is if he gets dinged up, if you can somehow spin his absence from within the game as injury related. That's the only way that I think you get him out of the game at this point. I think you've got to ride high or sink with him over these next 4 weeks.
The fans, I'll say this. I almost, for Jalen's sake, wish this game was in Washington so that he could play the game on the road, because the minute he doesn't do something well, you think those fans are going to let Nick Sirianni know that there's another option?
Sure they will. But I also think that, look, this is a guy who's found a way to rise above adversity throughout his career. Look, his last game played is still that awful game against the Giants. And I'm sure that has stuck with him ever since, he left the field up at MetLife 2 weeks ago. So I think this guy, we're going to see that he is a competitor. I'm not saying he's going to play the game of his life, but I think he's going to be a lot more careful with the football. And against Washington, with the way the Eagles have run the ball, they've got so many holes up front as well on their defensive line. As long as he doesn't turn the ball over, I think the Eagles win this game. So, and I think he's smart enough to know that too. He saw how much it hurt. So, look, I think having this game at home is going to be a big advantage for the team. This crowd is going to be juiced up and should be jacked up and loud. And I'd rather have that than have Jalen Hurts playing on the road just so, he doesn't get booed. Because, listen, these games are all against the division. These Eagles fans travel. There's going to be enough there that you'd hear the boos anyway.
There is some possibilities that Brandon Brooks returns, Jordan Howard returns. So it appears that this team is going to be as healthy as they can be. Obviously, you're not getting Brandon Graham back. You're not getting who else is hurt that's done for the year. I mean, but Sayamala is the other guy. I don't even know that Sayamala would play, though, once he comes back. But, as you mentioned earlier, Washington seems banged up, and the Eagles might be as healthy as they can possibly be.
Yes, and that as we talked about, Washington's now dealing with some injuries, so they're obviously not going to be at full strength. As you mentioned, the Eagles are also, still going to be missing some guys. But look, this bye, when you saw the schedule, you go, wow, that's late. That's a rough time to have a bye. Boy, I wish it was earlier. The way things have played out, this team had a huge opportunity to exhale, clear their minds, as well as get their bumps and bruises healed up. I think this bye came at a perfect time, frankly, to allow them to really come back here and see the finish line within reach. They control their own destiny. It's all in front of them. They have nobody to blame but themselves if they don't get there. And I think, ultimately this bye came at a great time. And you're going to start adding these pieces back into place at the time you need them most. And I think a Jordan Howard coming back in, a Brooksy coming back in. I mean, Driscoll has done decent. Herbig after him has done okay at that right guard position. But, man, imagine getting Brooks put back in there and running behind that line. I mean, yeah, I think there's certain things happening at the right time for this team. I think the bye came at the right time, and I think you're going to see two different teams on the field. Washington's trying to just kind of hold on to what they've got, and the Eagles are coming for them.
Scott Grayson, Fox 29, Grayson's grades over at 97.3 ESPN.com. And, of course, the Eagles in Washington. We'll have it for you here live on 97.3 ESPN this Sunday at 1 o'clock. All right, Scott, we will see you on the television tonight, pal.
All right, you got it, Mike.
Scott Grayson, Fox 29 tonight. You can check him out on the TV. And, of course, every Monday here for Grayson's Grades on 97.3 ESPN. And, of course, he is brought to you each and every week by Boardwalk Honda. From Maine to Miami, nobody beats a Boardwalk deal. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. Thanks to Scott. Mosher will have football at 4 today from the Inside the Birds podcast. Stick around for that as well. Week 14 in the books. It was kind of a week. It was a good week to have a bye week because you didn't really have to be stuck in front of the TV. It was the 1 o'clock games were terrible. The 4 o'clock games had some intrigue if the officials weren't so bad. And the game last night, I mean, it was definitely explosive. We'll go through the Week 14 matchups here on the Sports Bash Live, what they all meant, where everything stands, and more. Flyers, by the way, they're on a 2-game win streak. How about that? This is the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. And don't forget, download the free mobile app. You can get the app in the Apple Store, Google Play, and you can message us for free through the phone. 3:29 on a Monday. I'm Mike Gill. What's up, everybody? Follow me on Twitter at Mike Gill Show. At Mike Gill Show on Twitter. Text the show 609-403-0973. Couple text messages from the break. Mike, I'm trying to figure out why everyone thinks Dallas is going to sit their starters the last game. They still have a chance to be the number 2 seed if we assume Arizona is the number 1 seed. They're only a game back from Green Bay and Tampa Bay. Well, if they're in the same spot, then yeah. I mean, if they can move up in the standings, I don't think they'll sit guys. I don't think Dallas is going to be within a game to move up. That's just me. I think Dallas has probably 2 losses left somewhere. I think they could lose to Washington the second time they play, although they'll be the favorite. They just won at Washington. They do play Arizona again, or not again. They play Arizona coming up, and they play the Giants, and they play Philadelphia. So I think if Dallas loses twice, 4th is their seeding. But I do agree with the text message. Right now, they're only a game out of those spots. If one of those other teams slip up somewhere along the way and Dallas can overtake them, then no, they're not going to sit their players. But I think if they have the game clinched, if they have the 4 seed clinched and they can't do anything better, like move to 3 or 2, then I don't think Dallas plays a lot of guys. Keep in mind, they've had a lot of injury issues. There's a team that, has been missing guys a lot this season. So they don't want to go into a game against Philadelphia, who probably would need the game or might need the game, and risk the possibility of playing a lot of their guys and then the possibility of somebody getting hurt against a Philly team that's out there. The thing would be, I don't think Dallas, look, in today's game, rivalries don't mean as much as people think they do. Dallas isn't going to say, well, we really care about beating Philadelphia, so we're going to play our starters in that game. If they could get their starters a rest in a 17-game season and not have to play that 17th game, they're going to sit those guys, especially Dak Prescott. You might see some of the starters play, but I don't think they want to play Dak Prescott if they don't have to. Guys who have been banged up a lot this year, DeMarcus Lawrence, who I think, you saw yesterday, him getting back, Gregory getting back, what they mean to the team. You don't want to have Micah Parsons out there running around like a crazy man, getting hurt in the last game of the year. That doesn't mean anything. So there's a possibility, I think anyway, that Dallas will have no shot to move up in the standings. And the last game of the year, they are kind of, pigeonholed into the number 4 spot. That's how I would see that. 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. Mike, the refs are absolutely atrocious. I don't understand why these refs can't be assigned full-time employment despite the season only being a few months. For how much more money they make, or for how much money they make, they can still give them full jobs, and in the offseason they can reassess. I've heard this argument about making the officials full-time employees and that would help fix it. I don't know in what world people think them being full-time is going to make them any better at their job. Why would them being full-time make them any better? They're not doing anything in the offseason to get better. So if they're a full-time employee, they're going to go out and ref games. You can't duplicate the speed of this game, and that's why they're bad. They're not bad because, well, I take that back. I don't know. I don't think I've ever met an NFL official. Actually, I take that back. I have met an NFL official. I met Gene Steratore, and who's the other guy? Mike Pereira. I met both those guys. Other than that, I don't know that I've ever met an NFL referee. But I will say this. I have met plenty of people who've officiated games at all different levels, minor league baseball, high school baseball, referees in basketball, referees in football. And there are many times that I question how the hell this person has a license or whatever test you have to pass to officiate or ref or umpire a game. Like, I would love to sit down with all of the NFL officials and just have a conversation with them and then get a feel for myself. Like, you look at some of them guys on the sidelines, they stand on the sideline, the side judge who basically just gets their ear chewed off by the coach all day. Most of those guys look like they are completely clueless. You have guys out in the field that almost – now, look, you're just flat out going by the facial expressions or whatever, is happening out there. But I wonder how much these guys really know about what they're doing. And you might say, well, to get to that level, maybe not. Look, in the world we live in, nothing surprises me. How somebody gets their job and gets appointed to that spot. You're telling me there's not a couple of referees in the college game that are superior to some of the guys doing NFL games? Do we think the NFL has the market cornered on the best referees there are? Of course not. So I don't know why them being full-time changes anything. I've heard this argument so much. I actually heard a podcast talking about this the other day, and the guy on the podcast brought up the same thing. He's like, I don't know why a full-time referee. Now, if there's a referee out there that says, no, if these guys were full-time, this is why they would be better, I'd love to hear your reasoning. And I'm not saying these guys aren't good because they're just bad. I think the game's just too fast for them. There's too many rules. The game's too fast. It's a tough fix. I'm not blaming them. It's a hard game to officiate. The whole pass interference thing, you get to a point like everything's pass interference. Everything is pass interference. At some point, you just tell the receiver, hey, buddy, just deal with it, dude. Fight through the guy, right? Fight through and make the catch. If the guy is like literally tackling you, that'll be pass interference. But this stuff where he's grabbing his arm, this and that, like it's too much. It's too much, and it's not consistent enough. No, I don't think full-time refs is the answer. Look, I don't care. You want to make them full-time? Make them full-time. I don't care. I don't think that's going to help fix anything. 609-403. 0973. That's the second email, a text today about the officiating, by the way. Mike, so the Cowboys have shipped their own benches in. What did Washington do to make them prima donnas wear their blue jerseys today? I think Washington and Dallas, when they play, Washington always makes Dallas. They're like, Washington is the one team that always makes Dallas wear the blue jerseys.
I actually know the story behind the benches. They explained this. I forget what show it was. I don't know if it was Network or ESPN, but apparently Dallas doesn't trust Washington's benches that they give them to actually heat the work. So Jerry Jones brings his own.
Do they always?
Yes.
Why was it only reported for the first time yesterday?
Maybe it was reported previously before that.
I've never seen that happen before.
I just know that apparently Jerry Jones...
why were they making such a big deal out about it yesterday than if it always happens?
Maybe they didn't do it last year. I don't know. I just know that Jerry
Jones...
ever
before.
I don't know if they ever did before. I just know that Jerry Jones says this is what they do. When they play Washington, they don't trust them, and they brought their own benches.
Yesterday. But
yesterday's game.
You're saying they've done it in the past?
I don't know if they've done it in the past.
Oh, well, before you said they always do it.
Well, Jerry Jones claims it. I don't know if Jerry Jones tells the truth.
No, if they always do it, there's no way that they would be making a big deal about it for just this week. This has to be the first time they've ever done it.
I assume Jerry Jones tells a lie every day. So as far as I'm concerned, anything he says can and should be used against him in the court of law.
Well, they didn't even need it yesterday. It wasn't cold enough that you needed to have heated benches.
Apparently, Jerry thought it was.
But Yeah, whatever. But Washington always makes Dallas wear the blue jerseys.
Yes.
Like, it's the one time a year that Dallas gets stuck wearing the blue.
They're the one team that forces them.
Yeah, they will never give in. They'll never let Dallas wear the whites in Washington.
Right.
Although I was listening on the radio yesterday, and they said on the radio broadcast that, and I tweeted this out, that 90 or 95% of the lower bowl were Dallas fans.
It looked like that on TV, at least.
Wow.
It looked like there were a lot of Cowboy fans in attendance.
Interesting.
I don't know how vocal they were because it seemed like half the stadium was kind of like just mute half the game. But
well, you could definitely hear, like, when Dallas did something well, you could
it
definitely.
wasn't overwhelming. You know
Well,
what I mean?
no, they're Dallas fans. I mean, they don't know what the heck's going on. But they definitely were there, apparently. I mean, the guy on the radio said, the broadcaster said, hey, the lower bowl appears to be 90 to 95% Dallas fans.
Visually on television, there were a ton of Cowboy fans, way more than I expected.
Washington used to be a good football town. They just haven't been very good for 30 years.
Like you make an entire franchise of fans just feel like you're never going to be good. Why should they show up?
You like football?
Maybe if you don't endear yourself to the fans, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, but that's one thing that fans always say. Oh, stop going, stop paying. Nobody ever does that.
Except Washington fans.
Apparently. All right. So yesterday, let's see what happened. You had, I'm trying to these games yesterday. Okay, so Browns-Ravens. The Browns win that game. The Ravens are in trouble all of a sudden. When we do who's in, who's out, I had the Ravens losing that division. Now, Cincinnati didn't help themselves but that Browns win puts them in the mix now. I think the Browns were kind of counted out. And now all of a sudden they're kind of back in the mix.
Well, they were counted out because people assumed that it seemed like the Ravens were going to beat them, and then all of a sudden the Ravens don't beat them. People are like, wait a minute, what just happened?
Yeah, I mean, the Ravens thing with
Lamar hurting his ankle.
getting hurt, that's a problem. They've had so many injuries this year. This was the number 1 seed a couple of weeks ago, and now they're in danger of getting out. The Jaguars thing with what's going on, Trevor Lawrence, 4 interceptions. I talked about Trevor Lawrence the other day. People talked about, this is why in the NFL, you just, like the tanking thing in the NFL, I'm just like, it's not worth it. Trevor Lawrence might be great. I don't know. To me, he doesn't seem anything special. He just seems like a guy.
I think he's regressed. I think he's gotten worse since he got to Jacksonville.
But you know what? I think we took for granted that he was just this dominant force even last year for Clemson.
It was the people were big on him because he's a phenomenal physical talent. He has amazing physical tools. He's a guy who, when you see him play, he has these moments where he does things. Even in the games with the Jags, he still makes those throws. You're like, okay, that's why he was drafted. The problem is he's on such a garbage team with a garbage coaching staff with a garbage organization that's turning him in the garbage.
Yeah, when you get a quarterback that's special, you know that he's special. Like, look at Joe Burrow. They weren't great last year, but you could tell Joe Burrow was Herbert. You could tell. Lawrence doesn't look like those guys.
But you could argue those guys have better talent around them.
Sure, but they didn't win a lot. Like, just because you had this great quarterback, I'm not asking Jacksonville to win. I'm asking the Again, I bring this up 2 weeks ago. Lawrence is never in the highlight package. You never say, hey, the Jacksonville Jaguars lost, but man, they've got a guy that's ready to turn this thing around. No, he's just an average Joe playing quarterback. It's part of they didn't score. I get it. They don't have great talent around them, but 4 interceptions, whatever his numbers are this year, he has not been a guy that you're like, man, the team is not good around him, but they have found their guy at this. The Bengals weren't good. They won 4 games, but you could tell that Burrow
was special,
was different. Yes.
I would just say this. I'm not selling Trevor Lawrence for the one reason that there's a part of me that looks at him and I think his career is going to be, I'm not saying he is this guy, but I feel like his career could become like Jim Plunkett. He could be the number 1 pick who's in a garbage situation. He goes to a better situation. All of a sudden, he flourishes.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't know. We've seen a lot of guys go number one and just falter because of the situation they've been in. That
Sure.
could be a possibility for him. Chiefs 48-9. That thing with the Raiders.
Oh my goodness, that was so stupid. The Raiders tried to stomp on the Chiefs logo, and the Chiefs were like, "We're not going to let you win in our house," and they just annihilated them.
And the Chiefs. That's the first game that the Chiefs looked like the Chiefs on both sides of the ball.
Right.
Right. Saints just absolutely lambasted the Jets. Zach Wilson was brutal again, 19 of 42.
They actually let Taysom Hill run the ball yesterday, Mike. It was amazing. It was like, you let the running quarterback run the ball, you have a chance to win.
The Falcons-Panthers game, kind of inconsequential. The winner of that game was going to be a game up. Now it kind of knocks the Panthers out.
I don't know what's going on in Carolina. They fire the offense coordinator. Then in the game, they bench Cam. They bring in PJ Walker. After the game, rule says Cam's our starting quarterback. I have no idea what's going on there.
Yeah. Now, they were reported to have called the Eagles about Gardner Minshew at the trade deadline.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the Eagles, whatever they asked for was too much. They ended up trading for Matt Barkley and then signing Cam Newton. But that spawned off a whole nother report, basically by Ann Rappaport yesterday, that suggested that the Panthers had called just to see what the compensation would be. And once they found out what it was, they thought it was too much. But now that other teams, now that they saw Minshew play, they're now reporting that the Eagles are going to get a lot of calls, and they're hoping that possibly they can add another mid-round pick if, in fact, somebody wants Minshew, because keep in mind, they have him signed for another year.
Hey, this is the throwback. This is the AJ Feely, all those guys years ago where you have the backup quarterback and you trade him for picks.
So that's a little bit of a look at the schedule. We'll finish it up on the other side. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, brought to you by East Coast Roofing, Siding, Windows, serving all of South Jersey. You call, they'll show up online, eastcoastroofing.com. Paul Hudrick in an hour or so, a little less than an hour from now on the Ben Simmons News. Casey Joyner, one thought every game. Jeff Kerr on the NFL, NFC East tonight at 5:30. More Sports Bash next. All right, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Back through the NFL happenings. Seattle's back in this thing. I mean, 33-13, they beat up on the Texans. They got a good game yesterday from Penny. The running back had 137, 2 touches. Lockett, 5 for 142. If the Seahawks keep playing, I know they played the Texans yesterday, but they can find themselves back in this thing if they keep playing this way. With Russell Wilson appears to be healthier than he was the first couple of weeks he was back. So that was my takeaway there. We got Denver beats up on the Lions. The Lions had all sorts of problems yesterday. Yeah, COVID stuff, injury stuff. That was you got a bad team, even worse, depleted with they were missing like 10 guys yesterday.
Yeah, and then the Denver was playing for Demaryius Thomas, who passed away. So there's a lot of emotion in that game, too.
Yeah, that was sad. They started the game with 10 players to kind of tribute Demaryius Thomas, who passed away on Friday. That was a crazy story as well. Chargers, Herbert, 3 touchdowns. Guyton had a big game. The Giants are really bad. They tried to do some – I mean, what the hell were they doing yesterday?
The Giants are not bad. They're horrible.
Good. That warms my heart.
Merry Christmas, Mike.
Warms my heart that the Giants are that bad. You got you probably have people out there that want them to fire the coach. I mean, come on, they're not firing the coach in the middle of the year. Are you kidding? Like at this stage of the season, what are they going to do? Fire? Like, what is that accomplishing?
It doesn't even matter at this point,
right? I
mean, they're so bad.
By the way, the Giants aren't going to fire Judge in the offseason either. They're paying McAdoo and they're paying Shermer.
Listen, the guy they're going to fire is Gettleman. Gettleman's the guy on the hot seat.
Well, if you hire a new GM, though, he doesn't want Joe Judge to be the coach.
I don't know.
But
I don't know what he wants. Nobody knows.
But I think they're still paying McAdoo and Sherman.
They're definitely still playing Shermer. Yeah, I think this is the last year they're playing McAdoo.
All right. Well, that's something to consider, too, of why they haven't fired. But I can just hear the Giant fans crying, oh, you got to fire the coach. You know, seriously, what are they going to – they're going to fire the – who's going to be the coach? Freddie Kitchens for the next couple of weeks here?
Like, that's going to solve
What's
anything.
That accomplishing?
It's going to solve nothing.
Nothing. The Niner game, Burrow had a big game, but not – 348 for Burrow, not enough.
Listen, man, Burrow's playing hurt, and I think that people don't understand that. You know, he's trying to act like it's no big deal, but you can tell he's not there 100%.
Well, he still played great. I mean, they just couldn't. I mean, Chase played pretty good. Kittle was awesome yesterday, by the way. The 49ers, give them credit. Like, they've hung around this thing.
Kittle's a monster, man.
Yeah. Well, he hasn't had that big of a year this year, but yesterday he broke out.
He broke out all right.
Yeah, 13 for 151.
I mean, he was making huge plays.
The Bucks were up 24-0. Bills came coming back. They get to overtime. Then the officiating in that game was horrible. Buffalo, some anomaly in that game yesterday where they didn't where every yard that was gained came from Josh Allen, either passing or running.
It's the first time in over 40 years, they said, that a quarterback is accounted for all the passing and all the rushing yards on the team.
Right. They can't stop anybody, though.
Buffalo. Did you see what Sean McDermott said after the game? They asked him about the play calling, and he said, well, I thought the second half was good.
Yeah.
And they're like, what about the first half? He's like, not talking about it. Like, jeez.
Yeah. 33-27, and then last night, 45-30. Rodgers for 341, 4 touchdowns. Adams had 121 and 2 touchdowns. And there you go, week 14. We'll do One Thought every game with Casey Joyner coming up tonight at 5. When we come back, it's football at 4. Paul Hudrick next hour, too, on the Ben Simmons news. You can check out our website, 97.3 ESPN.com, for the latest on Ben Simmons. It seems that with each passing day, as we get closer to the 15th, more and more teams seem to be interested in Ben Simmons services. So get the details now at 97.3 ESPN.com. Plus, Doug Peterson spoke over the weekend in an article at the New York Post. We have the details at 97.3 ESPN.com where he says, I will go to the grave with this. Check it out now at 97.3 ESPN.com. Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, and it is brought to you locally by Caesars Entertainment Group of Atlantic City. Come experience the ultimate sports destination all season long. Wild Wild West, Tropicana, Harrah's Resort, Atlantic City. Book your game day experience today at Caesars.com. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN, and Football at 4 today. Jeff Mosher, of course, from the Inside the Birds podcast, set to join me here in just a second as we take a look at the Eagles at the bye week, what's going on with them, and, of course, some of the news around this team. I want to get Jeff's thoughts on, obviously, what is the big question moving forward. Not really a big question. We know Jalen Hurts is going to be the starter, but there was some reports over the weekend that the Eagles might have some interest in Gardner Minshew from other teams out there. So we'll dive into that possibility as well. All right, let's bring Jeff Mosher in for Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN as the bye week is officially in the books. Jeff Mosher, what's going on, man?
Mike, how you doing, buddy?
Survived the bye week, got Dallas and Washington. Dallas wins that game, and now it sets up, a 5-way tie for the number 7 seed in the NFC for that number 7 spot. Washington currently has it. Minnesota's next, then Philadelphia. You got Atlanta and New Orleans. I mean, this thing is going to be a mess these next couple of weeks.
A lot of traffic on the 6 and 7 highway there. You got about 6 cars trying to merge into one lane.
Yes, you do. Washington left that game yesterday. I mean, the final score would say it's close. I mean, they were getting beat up. They got beat up. They lost some injuries in the game. I mean, did you see anything from Washington? Because a lot of times styles will make fights, and there's times where you say, hey, this team matches up pretty good with them. When you watch Washington yesterday, what was your takeaway with their matchup coming up this weekend?
Yeah, and full disclosure, I didn't get to see the game live as it was happening. I was taking a true bye weekend off with the family, but from what I've observed since, obviously the Washington offensive line had a whole lot of trouble protecting Tyler Heineke, specifically protecting against Micah Parsons.
Yeah.
And when Washington has been successful before leading up to the Dallas game, they've been able to run the ball well and set up manageable third downs for Tyler Heineke, who can move around the pocket a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But it seemed to me that Washington was they were not able to move the ball very well offensively. And then they gave up some big plays, both on offense and defense, and got behind, as you just mentioned, got behind in a hole early, which takes that ability to neutralize the opponent with the runaway when you kind of get jumped on like that.
Most you look at, and by the way, Washington leaves the game. They had some injury issues. Jonathan Allen tested positive for COVID. He could miss the game on Sunday. So with the way Washington's going, what about Philadelphia entering this game now? It seems that they are about as healthy as they can be, save for the guys who are out for the rest of the season.
Yeah, well, we've got what I would call a very interesting 24 to 36 hours coming up here, because while the attention right now at the moment is going to go to Washington and Jonathan Allen already going on the COVID-19 list, the Eagles are coming off a bye, which means they've got players who presumably were traveling all around the country and coming back, from wherever they were over the bye, and they all obviously will have to get tested. I'm sure that is going on today. And so tomorrow we should find out their COVID-19 status. So I would think, if not later tonight. So maybe, and I'm not saying I know if anybody tested positive. I'm just saying that naturally you have all these people scattered across the country coming back. You hope that everyone comes back and tests negative, but we'll have to see.
Yeah.
As far as injury situation, I think the big question mark is still Jalen Hurts, because the ankle injury was severe enough to keep him out of a game. And when you have if it's a high ankle sprain, and I don't think they've actually come out and said it, and maybe they have, but sometimes that takes more than just a week or two to get over. So we'll have to see, and they really won't practice until Wednesday, how he's doing, and be able to give us more information on whether they realistically expect him to start against Washington.
Yeah, I know that, most people just assume too that Hurts will be back and that he'll be ready to play. I don't know. Do we have any understanding if they played this week, would he have been ready?
We don't have an understanding of that. And that's, some of that is intentional. They're not trying to advertise it. And some of that is just because obviously most of it's because they were not there. And I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know this for a fact if Jalen had to stay kind of back to continue to get treatment on the ankle throughout the course of the week because of it. But I think we have a lot to find out. We will definitely know more on Wednesday. And if there's some seed of doubt there, I think that's going to carry through the week. And you're going to wonder, I don't know who had on their bingo card in 2021 football, a potential Gardner Minshew, Kyle Allen matchup there in week, whatever it would be, 15. Although it sounds like the news from Washington is that Heineke will be all right, but who knows these days,
Right. Yeah, I know. I mean, Allen was in there late in the game. I mean, he fumbled that ball. I don't know if it was an actual fumble or not. I mean, they looked at it. They called it a fumble, but Allen was the one in the game in the big moments of that game. So we'll see. What is your understanding of where Brandon Brooks might be?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's kind of something we on Inside the Birds have really tried to figure out. And just like everybody else, we're beholden to what Nick Sirianni has said. Now, what Nick Sirianni has said up until this past week was that there is no update and there's no timetable. What he said right before in his last press conference before the bye, he said there will be an update. So very curious to hear in his next press conference what he has to say, because I would imagine that if he's ready to play or healthy and can practice this week, he would slide right back there at right guard. I think it was somewhat of a question when Jack Driscoll was playing because they were on such a roll and he was playing well, and he represents the future of the offensive line in some capacity, as opposed to Brandon Brooks, who does not. But now that it's Nate Herbig out there at right guard, and interestingly, them signing LaRaven Clark to through next year, so it looks like they're adding depth to their O-line. It makes me wonder what the situation is with Brandon Brooks.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you make, is that even though he hasn't played at all since week 2, I guess is when he got hurt against San Francisco, would he just go right back in there and be ready to go over these last 4 weeks of the season? And if he's playing at the level that he typically plays at, I mean, this guy, I mean, he's an amazing spectacle considering he's gone through 2 Achilles tears and has really not missed a beat when he's played. How much better would their offensive line be with a healthy Brandon Brooks?
Well, that's where you say a healthy Brandon Brooks, you have to wonder about. A pectoral injury is difficult. Javon Hargrave had one last year on like the second or third day of training camp that forced him to miss pretty much all of training camp. And that occurred in the weight room, as I reported back then. And why it's complicating is because unlike maybe an Achilles or doing something else that once you get a certain, past a certain recovery point, you can start ramping up exercise and doing different things. When you have a pec issue, it's my understanding that weightlifting, your weight training and physical training can be a difficult thing there because you're not trying to re-aggravate it. So you may have to be off the weights and the weight machine for quite a while. Now you can probably run and do things to keep your conditioning up, but you do wonder about your ability to maintain your strength, your power, and your upper body acumen, which is very important for an offensive lineman. And if you remember last year, Javon Hargrave did not really have a very good September. It was about 6 or 7 weeks before he started to play like a good interior defensive tackle. And so I would wonder that even if quote unquote medically cleared to play or healthy, if Brandon Brooks would just be a little bit behind the 8 ball compared to everybody else who's been out there for the last 2 weeks on the offensive line. I'm sorry, last 2 months.
Right. Moshe, another thing that's interesting with this game, I think, first of all, let me ask you, do you believe that this game is essentially you have to win this game if you want to realistically make the play? I know we've talked about in the past, they'll be mathematically still alive, but you're looking at only 3 games left in the year. You're only 1 game back, but then the tiebreakers really start to pile up against you. So if you're going to lose to Washington, it almost can't be this one.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I feel like in order for them to make the playoffs, they've got to win 3 or 4 games. Mm-hmm. How they win those 3 or 4 may not be relevant. Okay. I think you definitely at least have to take one from Washington. You're right, because you're competing with them for that 7th spot. And if you lose both,
if you get swept by them, that's 2 losses
done.
Anyway. You're done.
Right. But could they lose this game to Washington, then win out and potentially still make the playoffs? Maybe. There are some teams that we haven't talked about because they were slumping, but now seem to have gotten their act together a little bit. Like New Orleans is an example. They're in that mix, and we don't really refer to them much, but they've got Taysom playing better at quarterback, and they've got Alvin Kamara back. And
they got the linemen back too, aren't they?
That's right, the linemen too. And you look at their schedule, and you think, they can win at least 2 of their next 4. I think Carolina's still on it. I think Atlanta might be. I forget who's on it. There are a lot of division games. So, I mean, if they're going to win 3 or 4, that's just another, team or 2 or 4 that you got to compete with.
Yeah.
So,
well, and the other team I think that's interesting all of a sudden is Seattle, who is only a game back, and they're 5-8. So when you say 5-8, it makes you feel like they're just so far out of the mix. But they've now won 2 games in a row. They play the Rams, the Bears, the Lions.
Right.
And the Cardinals, who could be wrapped up by week 18, who knows? But, Seattle to me, is kind of still interestingly in this thing.
Yep. And then there's this kind of ancestral element where maybe the Saints don't do well and they lose a couple of the games. They're out of it, but they play the Falcons among their last 4. And so the Falcons have the 49ers, which is tough because 49ers are playing well, but you never know. But then they have the Lions, the Bills, and the Saints. The Bills have been playing terribly. I don't expect Atlanta to beat the Bills, but again, you just never know. If they win 3 of 4, then the Eagles have to win 3 or 4 just to make the tiebreaker come into play.
Well,
because if the Eagles only win 2, if Atlanta finishes a game a win higher than the Eagles, then Atlanta's in, obviously. So,
and the odd part here is this is where Josh asked me earlier, which of the games this week was the one, that outside of the Dallas game affected them the most. Now, San Francisco won. That moved them to 6.
Right.
But to me, it was really Minnesota beating Pittsburgh.
Definitely.
Because Minnesota has all sorts of wonky tiebreakers. They've got the common opponents who – when did the common opponents become higher on the depth chart than the conference record? The conference record is the same, though. Right. So if Philly beats – this is interesting, Moshe. If they both go 3-1 and Philly's 3 includes Dallas, they would have the same record against common opponents. They would then go to their conference record, and that would be the same. The next tiebreaker, which is like the 5th tiebreaker, it only goes to 7. Do you even know what the 5th one is?
After conference, common opponent, is it total points score?
It is strength of victory.
Of strength of oh my God. I wouldn't even know how you evaluate strength of victory. But
right now, Minnesota's strength of victory is significantly higher than Philadelphia's best win is against Denver.
Right.
And Minnesota's best win, they beat Green Bay. So
beat Green Bay, right.
Their strength of victory is like 465, and Philadelphia's is like 385, something to that effect. So
yeah,
Minnesota winning and them staying in the mix, they have so many tiebreakers over Philadelphia that could be something that ends up, sticking its ugly head in the mix here.
Yeah, Minnesota is, I agree with you. That win over the Steelers that they tried really, really hard to give away on Thursday night, but still managed to escape with the win anyway, put them in a pretty good spot. Now, they lost to it's amazing that you can come out and beat the Steelers like that after losing to the Lions just 4 days earlier, but that's kind of the NFC these days. So you look at their schedule, and Minnesota has 2 games left against the Bears, 1 against the Rams, 1 against the Packers. So they should theoretically be 2-2. But if you could lose to the Lions, you can lose to any of these teams. But I don't want, it's kind of like the Eagles lost to Miami a couple of years ago. It doesn't mean that they're going to play that badly against bad teams all across the way. The one thing about the Minnesota Vikings, if we're being really fair and objective here and you compare them to the Eagles, they're a better team than the Eagles. I mean, they have a better passing offense. They have better receiving weapons. They have a better running back. Maybe their running game might not be equivalent to the Eagles, but they have a way more dynamic running back. They're getting, I think, a little bit healthier. I know they were besieged by injuries in the middle of the year.
It's a clear indication, though, Moshe, of their offensive line is what holds them back. Minnesota's offensive line is dreadful, and that's why they stink. That's why from week to week they're so inconsistent. Like, they have Justin Jefferson. The Eagles would love to have Justin Jefferson. And by the way, they could have had Justin Jefferson. But
I've heard.
Right? And even having this great piece in Justin Jefferson, They are in the same spot as Philadelphia is. Go figure.
Right. And so because their offensive line is inconsistent, and because the Eagles, right, you would say the second most important, because their quarterbacking is inconsistent and their pass game is inconsistent, they have lost against virtually any decent team that they've played, and that's why they're in this position. So it's it's the NFL for you.
Absolutely. Obviously, I want to get your thoughts on John Gannon and this defense over the Final Four. That might be the most unknown to me about this team moving forward.
Certainly is. I mean,
I feel like I know what the offense is or wants to be or what they're good at. I'm not sure I know what the defense is good at or what they want to be.
Right. I mean, I compared it to kind of Jonathan Gannon to kind of like a turtle who, for the first 7 weeks, he just stayed in the shell. And then gradually he would poke his head out a little bit and see what the other world out there is like. And certainly you've seen that over the last few weeks in some occasional blitzing like he did against the Broncos and Saints, and a little bit against the Giants, almost none against the Jets. And I just wonder what kind of approach he's going to take to a guy like Taylor Heineke, who's not a bad or a terrible quarterback. He's not a great quarterback. The Eagles have had this weird thing where they seem to be playing either really good quarterbacks or just bottom 5 ones. But I mean, it sticks out to me that when you look at the Eagles wins, their last 4 wins have come against Zach Wilson, Trevor Siemian,
who was awful yesterday, by the way.
He was Trevor Siemian, the Broncos, Teddy Bridgewater, and Jared Goff. Now, Jared Goff himself is actually not a terrible quarterback as much as the jokes are. I mean, he beat them last year as a Rams quarterback. But that that Lions team is so terrible that you can't really legitimize some great. They beat a bad team. They beat a winless team at the time. So their last 4 wins have really come against teams that are like, at quarterback. So I don't know how that relays or parlays to Heineke, who can be pretty good some games and not so good others. But I just don't know what to expect from Jonathan Gannon. Is
what happened?
Force the issue or just sit back there and think the front 4 gets it done?
Well, and another question, what Washington has done the last couple of weeks, Moshe, is they've tried to run the ball. They basically tried to do what the Eagles did and just say, hey, we're going to run.
Right.
So if they want to run the ball and kind of stick to that, you look at that the Eagles have not been great against the run this year. They were good against the run in years past under Jim Schwartz, but this year They have not been a good run-stopping team.
No, they haven't been a good run-stopping team. And the Broncos, we go back to that game. The Broncos were able to run the ball really well. They just fell behind, and Bridgewater was not very good at it. The Giants did not run the ball well, which was a good sign for the Eagles defense. I tend to think Washington, no matter what, will come out and try to get their run game going and get Antonio Gibson going. I think they're getting J.D. McKissick back for the game, or at least it seems like there's some optimism about that. So that's some pretty good, diversity to their run game. And plus he can catch the ball out of the backfield. Those guys have hurt the Eagles as well this year. Running backs and tight ends, any team that really focuses on that seems to have a good kryptonite for the Eagles. And I think that Washington is that kind of team.
All right, Jeff Mosher, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Really, the Eagles have come too far at this moment for the people out there who are like, I don't want to make the playoffs. They're in this thing that's 6-7, whether you like it or not. They're kind of there. I guess the one question, there was a report this weekend. Obviously, Hurts is going to play, but that teams were calling about Gardner Minshew. Right, one of the teams that was listed was Carolina. They called to see what the compensation would be. Obviously, they didn't like the compensation, or maybe they would have Gardner Minshew. But there was, in the report, it suggested that the Eagles could be getting a lot of calls this offseason for Minshew. Would he be a guy that they would be interested in moving again?
I mean, I don't know why the Eagles would trade Minshew unless they got a really good offer. And I consider a good offer a 4 or higher. And I have a real skepticism about a team giving up a 4th-round pick or higher for Gardner Minshew unless he gets on the field again this year and plays well, because we've seen that, the quarterback who kind of gets hot we've seen Matt Flynn throw 6 touchdowns in a game for the Packers in relief of or just starting for Aaron Rodgers, and then go get signed by the Seattle Seahawks, and then they don't even play him because they draft Russell Wilson, right? We've seen the Rob Johnsons, where you just see guys get like Nick Foles, go out and set the world on fire and then wind up getting a contract elsewhere. So perhaps that could happen with Minshew. So that leads me to believe a little bit, Mike, that they're not going to play Jalen Hurts unless he's 100%, or at least, capable of going out there and making plays. I think that they will be very judicious in whether or not they play Hurts based on his injury status.
Yeah, I think that story, obviously it's not happening now. I mean, they're not getting calls today, but somebody kicking the tires saying, hey, this all it just goes to show how many different ways there are to try to find a quarterback, or what teams are trying to do to get quarterbacks. When you are a franchise that might say, you know what, it's almost like the Eagles to me. We had this conversation in the 3:00 hour, which where they are as an organization motion. It's like, are these 4 games? How much do these 4, like we say last year, he played 4 games. I don't know enough about a guy in 4 games. We're saying now we don't have enough. So 4 more games, is that all of a sudden going to unlock the answer to how we feel about this guy? Like, I feel like this answer at the end of the year is going to be incomplete still.
It's funny. We had that conversation on Inside the Birds, how people keep saying, well, you got to give him the year. You got to give him the year. Then all of a sudden you look up and you say, well, there's really only 4 games left. How much more? But at the same time, by the same token, Mike, 4 games, I know there's an extra game now, but in a 16-game season, 4 games is a quarter of the season. So 4 games 2 years ago was crucial to the Eagles, and watching Carson Wentz go from a guy who was really struggling to putting the team on his back and going 4-0. So I don't want to discount the type of improvement, especially against division teams, that a quarterback can make, because he's seeing these teams twice now. So he's making adjustments. He's adding to that coaching. And I do think it can be important for a guy like Jalen Hurts to get that extra evaluation time in. At the end of the day, is it going to make a big difference? I don't know. I think it could if he plays really well, and you have seen developments in certain areas of his game. So, but to me, to get back to Minshew, he's not your starting quarterback next year, but he's a really good backup. So why would you, if you're the organization that has touted having the really good backup who's cost controlled, and you have him for this year and next year, even if you're going to be on to a newer quarterback next year, a veteran guy, whether Watson or Wilson or whatever, why wouldn't you still want to have Gardner Minshew there as your backup?
I agree, especially at his price. I mean, hey,
exactly.
You're going to get a mid-round. I think the report, it was Ian Rappaport, by the way. I couldn't think of who it was, but he mentioned it yesterday on the NFL Network, which was the Eagles could be asking for a mid-rounder, which is like 3rd, 4th, 5th. Is getting a 3rd, 4th, or 5th pick more important to the value that the Eagles put on their backup quarterback position? I would suggest no, right?
Well, a third. I'm doing a third. If you're giving me a third for Gardner Minshew, I will personally drive him if I'm Howie Roseman to whatever franchise wants to give me a 3rd round pick.
A 4th, 5th, or 6th.
Yeah.
Or
it's definitely not
5th.
A 6 to me is not, because that's what you paid to get him.
Right, that's what you paid to get him.
Yeah, a 5th. I don't know.
I just think
you got me thinking a 3rd and 4th, but I don't know about anything lower than that.
I just think the big thing is how much do these I would say this. Josh Allen, his first 2 years in the league, if you were in Buffalo, you would suggest he's not our guy. He's not the guy. His 3rd year, for God's sakes, he threw 37 touchdowns and had 10 interceptions. He went from a 58% completed pass to 69%.
Yeah.
If you judged him off the 2 seasons that he played, you would have said, get rid of this guy. And I'm not suggesting Jalen Hurts is Josh Allen, but if he goes from where he was in those first 4 games to playing a whole season, gets another offseason, and enters the 3rd season of play, who knows what he might be in that 3rd season. And I would say with the draft capital you have, put more pieces around him and then figure him out.
You could do that. Certainly could. If the Eagles were that franchise, I would say, hey, that's good patience and good franchise building. But the Eagles aren't always that franchise, and they may wind up getting cajoled into it because there's no better options that are available to them. That'll be some great offseason conversation.
All right, bye week is over. Eagles Washington football team. Listen to it here on Sunday on 97.3 ESPN. Jeff Mosher and the Inside the Birds guys. Check out the podcast wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple Pods, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and, of course, tomorrow, Football at 4 with Andrew DeCecco is back. Jeff Mosher, take care, man.
All right, talk to you Wednesday.
All right, that's Jeff. And, of course, Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, and it is brought to you locally by Caesars Entertainment Group of Atlantic City. Come experience the ultimate sports destinations all season long. Wild Wild West, Tropicana, Harrah's Resort, Atlantic City. Book your game day experience today at Caesars.com. I am Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash. Coming up in about 15 minutes, Paul Hudrick on the latest Ben Simmons news. If you just can't wait for the news, go to the website, 97.3 ESPN.com. Right now, 7 teams interested in Ben Simmons. Check out the teams now at 97.3 ESPN.com. All right, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. Sports Bash is brought to you by the 2022 Hercules Tires MAAC Basketball Championships. They're heading to Atlantic City Jim Whalen Boardwalk Hall March 8th through the 12th. Visit boardwalkhall.com for tickets and information. I will say the MAAC Basketball Championship this year, I think there could be two teams that get in the NCAA tournament that come from Atlantic City. If you watch a lot of college basketball, the possibility that we're going to be seeing two tournament teams here is, I don't want to say really, really good, but there's a possibility, I think, that two teams from the MAAC could get in here. For those of you out there who remember the coach by the name of Rick Pitino, you may have heard of him. He is the head coach of Iona. That's a really good team. I think they could be an at-large team if they don't end up winning the tournament. Now, if they end up winning the tournament, they may not get two. But Monmouth is really good. Monmouth is 8-2. In fact, Monmouth, I just watched them play the other night. They played St. John's, lost that game 88-83, just beat Pitt the other night. So, they played really tough against a good St. John's team. Pitt's not very good, I will say that. But St. John's is pretty good. Pitt's awful, and that warms my heart as well.
I know it does. By the way, don't forget that some of these teams, they're not what you may expect them to be, because remember, like in college football and college basketball, everyone had the chance to come back for another year. You didn't have to leave college at a certain point. You had the option to come back. So there are some players who they may have been done in college, but they came back for another year this year.
Yeah, and of the teams that helps the most are the smaller conferences.
Right, because those kids know they're not going to the NBA.
Right, they're not going NBA or anything. So you're like, you're going to give me an extra free year to play basketball. I'm going to do it. But Monmouth has already beaten Cincinnati and Pittsburgh, and they beat St. Joe's the other about a month ago. So Monmouth is a team that has a possible resume. They're not getting an at-large bid. I'll tell you that much right now.
But they're a team that could blow through that tournament, win it all
together. That's what I'm saying. If Monmouth wins the tournament, they would automatically get in. I think Iona could possibly get in as an at-large team. So that's why I'm saying there's a potential for two teams from this conference, which will be playing in Atlantic City's Boardwalk Hall, to get in. Now, Iona obviously has the win against Alabama. That would be a huge resume for them as an at-large team. They almost beat Kansas. They were number 4 at the time. They ended up getting Kansas pulled away late in the game. But Iona's got an opportunity because they play Seton Hall in their next game. That's a huge game for them to try to build their resume up. And I would say they don't have another game on their schedule that really would be a big resume booster for them. So Seton Hall, Alabama as their two signature wins, they could possibly get in as an at-large team because of Pitino, and then you have two top 25 wins. It's a long shot, but that's how I would say this conference has a chance for two.
And as someone who was at the last two tournaments in Atlantic City, there's always a team or two that goes on a run that you didn't expect.
Well, this conference is pretty good, though, too.
It's good basketball. It's like legitimate basketball. It's not like some rando conference that you see on, like, if you're scrolling through the ESPN Plus feed on a Monday night. You know
I mean, Iona's really good. Monmouth is good. Fairfield's pretty good. Manhattan's good. Quinnipiac, solid.
Quinnipiac's just a bunch of three-point shooters.
Yeah, and they got some good coaches in that league, too.
They do. I mean, you got Holloway up there with Monmouth. You got Dunleavy up there.
Yeah, Pitino.
You got Pitino, right, mentioned.
Yeah.
So, and also the guy who used to play at Duke, Paulus.
Oh, yeah, the guy was the quarterback for Syracuse.
Correct.
He went to Duke, yeah.
He's coaching in the league, too.
Paulus. So that's the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference. They're coming to Boardwalk Hall, and we will what is that tournament? It's March 8th through the 12th. All right. So we'll probably be giving tickets away for that as well. All right, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. When we come back, why Ben Simmons may be the hottest name on the NBA trade market and why Wednesday is a huge day for Daryl Morey and the Sixers. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Download the free mobile app. It's free in the Apple Store and Google Play. When we come back, Paul Hudrick inside the Sixers. He's back. He's got a newborn at home, so we had a couple of weeks off, but he is back in the regular rotation to talk a little Sixers who beat the Warriors the other night. What did that win mean? We'll talk to Paul next. All right, 4:43, Sixers in Memphis tonight. You can hear the game on 97.3 ESPN. The tip-off is at 8 o'clock as a tough Grizzlies team still winning games even without Ja Morant. But the Sixers were winning games over the weekend, obviously over the Warriors, and they don't have a key player. What did that win on Saturday night signal for Paul Hudrick, who is back, and he is with us right now on the Sports Bash. He is a proud new dad, so we had a couple of weeks off to get acclimated to the life of a father. Congratulations, Paul.
Thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, man. Well, over the last 2 weeks, the Sixers have gone here, there, everywhere, and we come back with them beating the Warriors on Saturday night, probably their signature win of the season.
Undoubtedly, to me, to beat for people who don't realize like how good the Warriors have been. I mean, they've flat out been the best team in basketball. And that's with them without Klay Thompson still. And they're already playing at that level. Steph's obviously playing at an MVP level, Draymond, defensive player of the year candidate every year. And Andrew Wiggins is playing great basketball. He's really elevated his game. Jordan Poole's a guy. I mean, they are a good, deep team. And I think that's the difference for them, this year, maybe compared to last year. And for the Sixers to beat them, and I think the way they did it too, Mike, I mean, the bench is what got them back into that game in the third quarter, which is remarkable when you consider where the Sixers bench has been at times this season. And then, of course, on top of that, the defense that Matisse Thybulle played against Steph Curry, and that's defensive player of the year type of stuff. I mean, the only guy ever to block 2 Steph Curry 3-pointers in a game. That's insane. One of the greatest offensive players to ever play the game. And for Matisse to do what he did, I think it just shows you the value he has. It shows you, the potential of what he can be. He can be that good. He can be a defensive player of the year type of guy.
Yeah, it helped too that he hit a couple of threes in the game too. So if he could be that player, do you think that's obviously holding his minutes back? Would they like to be able to play him more?
Clearly, I mean, with Joel Embiid, you have to be able to space the floor. He needs room. And that Boston loss, you saw that perhaps Doc rode Matisse a little bit too long, and they're basically Boston was triple teaming Joel Embiid on every possession because of Matisse Thybulle being out there. So yeah, I mean, him hitting threes is crucial to him staying on the floor. I will say this though, if you look at his field goal percentage, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but his field goal percentage is up like 5%. So there are the little things he's doing offensively, because I know a lot of people say like, oh man, he just hasn't improved offensively. I would push back against that, because I think he's doing better as a cutter this year. He's doing better of getting out on the fast break and just flat out using his speed to beat people down the floor. He's finishing a little bit better. So yeah, like clearly the 3-point shot, that has to come. If he wants to be a fixture for the Sixers and a fixture in lineups, especially with Joel Embiid, he has to hit the 3 ball. But I would say that he actually has improved some aspects of his offensive game.
Yeah, I know that Joel talked about how important the bench was in that game too. That was something that really stood out, was the bench. And, that's been a problem, the inconsistency of the bench. I guess that's bench play in the NBA.
For sure. And especially when you're playing some of the better teams in the league, that's going to happen. I thought against Charlotte, actually, I thought the bench was really good in those 2 games. And then they just had the Utah game, they were terrible, flat out. It just, you got pretty much nothing from the bench in that Utah game. And that was
one of those, that felt like a scheduled loss. Like,
I
know they played back to back, but when you were on the road trip, that first game at home after a little bit of a road trip, the home team typically comes out a little flat.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think the shooting numbers would indicate that, right? I mean, they were terrible from 3 in that game. I mean, the Jazz, it's what the Jazz do. The Jazz take a ton of threes, they make a ton of threes. And if you can't make threes, you're going to lose to them. That's flat out the way that goes, because they're just so good at that. But they couldn't hit it. If they hit a few threes, that game could look completely different. I mean, and everybody was missing them. Nobody was good from 3 that night. I think maybe Seth was like, somebody was like 2 of 5. And I think that was like the best number on the team. No one shot the ball particularly well that night. And yeah, I mean, the bench, it's been up and down, but like, as you said, that's part of bench players in the NBA. That's why they're bench players, and they're not starters, and they're not guys who relied on to play 30 plus minutes a night. I would say Shake Milton has looked really good in his role of kind of creating and generating offense. And Andre Drummond, when he just stays within himself, when he just does rim to rim stuff, grab rebounds, catch lobs, make the hustle plays, when he does those little things, he is perfect for this team. He's perfect for that bench unit. It's when he tries to go outside of his scope that he gets into trouble. And I sort of wonder if I know that Doc did it against the Warriors because he wanted Matisse up against Steph, but I sort of wonder if that should be the starting lineup. And I kind of really like the idea of Danny coming off the bench and bringing a little bit more veteran experience, a little bit more stability to that bench. And then at the end of the game, you kind of feel it out. Well, if I need a little bit more defense, I stick with Matisse. If I need a little bit more spacing and shooting, I go with Danny. And I also think we've discussed this before, Mike. I think it's a good way to kind of preserve Danny Green's legs a little bit. He's not the youngest guy. He's had injury issues. He had a hamstring earlier this year. He had a hip issue that bothered him all of last year. You watch him run, and he almost looks like he's in pain whenever he runs, just because of the wear and tear he's got on his body. So that could be a way to kind of preserve him. And maybe he only plays 20 to 25 minutes, but you're getting the most out of him because you're lessening his role and lessening his workload.
All right, Paul Hudrick, Liberty Ballers, December 15th is 2 days away. And I don't know if Rich Paul is bored, if these are legitimate, but Shams reporting today that Ben Simmons is the hottest name in the trade market. Up to 7 teams are among teams interested here. Does this make it feel like a real possibility, or is this just Rich Paul trying to drum up more interest for his client?
I would say the Woj report is the one that makes me feel like there might be a little smoke and perhaps a little fire, because Woj has really stayed out of it for the most part. You know what I mean? With Ben Simmons stuff. And really,
isn't it bizarre that you have to now pick which reports you actually trust based on where they're coming from?
Well, yeah, but that's the reality of the world we live in, Mike. That's the deal. I mean, it's very clear.
Has Shams gotten to the point now where he was a respected guy? Now it's just like, you're getting it from Rich Paul, and you're getting used to be like, throw this out there. Like, I feel bad for the guy almost.
Yeah, I mean, but I think for me, and I don't want to speak ill of another reporter. Obviously, Shams is great at what he does. He's got such great intel.
There was a point where you felt that he was actually getting better information than Woj was.
At times, yeah. He still does at times, quite frankly. I mean, there's still times where he does get better info, but what rubbed me the wrong way was the Rich Paul article, where it was basically a hit. I mean, there's no other way to put it. It was a hit piece on the Sixers with Rich Paul quotes in it. And that to me rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. And it also, this is me speculating, and I don't know this for sure, but if you're the Sixers, do you want to give that guy very much information after he runs with that piece? Right. I mean, granted, he clearly went to the Sixers for comment. The Sixers did have some comment, but to run with some of those Rich Paul quotes, I mean, it was like a little propaganda-y. Like, it was bad. So that was the one that kind of turned me off when it comes to Shams and his reporting. Not to take away from the fact that he is a great reporter that gets great scoops. And like you said, sometimes he does get better intel than Woj. That's just a fact. But just the fact to me, like, to get back to it, the Woj report carries a little bit more weight to me, just because since the season started, we really haven't heard anything from Woj, like, at all. So for him to come out of nowhere and say that the market is heating up, and I thought it was interesting that he didn't mention any teams and Shams did. So what it leads me to believe is the negotiations are
Ben
tight.
Simmons' list of teams that he would like to go to.
I mean, listen, the fact that the Lakers are on there,
right, like what player
be their GM,
player do the Lakers have that the Sixers would have any interest in?
LeBron James.
Exactly.
So, I mean, no. I guess you could say a 3-way deal where Westbrook gets dumped somewhere, and then so Ben Simmons gets to the Lakers that way. But I mean, whatever. But
I don't even know that they can take on Ben. I don't even think they could take on Ben Simmons' contract.
They would have to give up Westbrook in order to do that. They'd have to dump Westbrook's contract in order to make that work.
Right, exactly.
Because Westbrook makes an exorbitant amount of money. But just the fact that, like I said, Woj hasn't really entered the fray. He's just kind of coming in and saying all this. And the fact that he doesn't mention any teams, it leads me to believe that this is like probably tight-lipped stuff. Like, there's not a lot of that's the biggest leak they have is, hey, there's some progress. There's some hope emerging that we can get a deal done. And the fact that there's really little else to report in there, I think signifies to me that, like, the next thing we might get from Woj is Ben Simmons is being traded to X team. We'll see. I mean, I don't want to get people's hopes up. That December
I think you just
15th
did.
date is obviously a date that a lot of people have circled because players who were signed this offseason now can be moved. So that does make a pretty significant difference with salary cap.
20%
So
more
see.
players. 20% of the league is now 20% more. It was 65%. It's now 84%, 19%. So that adds, and it helps the Sixers too, because a guy like Korkmaz couldn't have been traded before. Now you can include him into a deal if need be, stuff like that. So, it definitely feels like something could change here. But then, of course, Daryl Morey could just be laughing and saying, I'm not doing this unless I get one of the guys back I want.
For sure. I mean, we really don't know. That's the other thing too, is it feels like a lot of the reports in general have been clearly from Rich Paul, from Ben's camp, very, very clearly. This is why the Woj report almost felt like perhaps it was from the Sixers camp. And if that's the case, that's why it leads me to maybe a little bit more of an optimistic thought that perhaps it could get done. Now, like you just said, maybe Daryl Morey is seeing all this and laughing because he knows that nothing's close and nothing's going to happen. And he knows that. And there's going to be nothing new on December 15th to talk about. That's a very real possibility. But at the same time, with that, because one thing that Morey has done really well throughout his career as an executive is he's really good at cobbling together these really super complicated, intricate, multi-team trades. As we saw, I think, the deal he did to get Robert Covington to Houston is one of the most complicated trades ever. 4 teams, and I can't remember how many players, but it was a lot, all just to get Robert Covington. So I think when it's all said and done, if there is, I mean, I would hope it's when there is a Ben Simmons trade, it's going to look really complicated. It's not going to be one of these scenarios where we see it's 1-for-1, whatever. Like it's going to be something intricate. It's going to be something complicated. And perhaps it's for a guy or players that we didn't even see coming. That's all a real possibility. So I would say at this point, brace yourselves for anything, whether that's this week or whether that's closer to the trade deadline. I think everything's on the table.
Tonight, Sixers in Memphis, 8 o'clock. He's Paul Hudrick at Paul Hudrick on Twitter. Check out all his stuff over at Liberty Ballers. He'll be back on Wednesday, and we'll talk more Sixers and possibilities because that could be the big day. Paul, take care, man.
You as well, Mike. Thanks, man.
One thought every game next. All right, 5 o'clock, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. And Casey Joyner, one thought every game. Can't wait to get his thoughts on Week 14. It's brought to you today by Cape Regional Health Systems. For a healthier life, call 609-463-CAPE. I'm Mike Gill. Follow me on Twitter at Mike Gill Show. And, of course, Casey Joyner is here as we take a look at everything that is going on in Week 14 in the NFL. One thought every game. Casey Joyner live right now on the Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN. What's going on, my man?
Hey, how are you?
All right, Week 14. No Eagles this week, but let's take a little deeper look at the matchup they'll have this week and what we saw in their game this week. So Dallas and Washington. What did we really see from the Washington football team this week? They're down in that game. They fight their way back. Was it them? Was it the Cowboys that got them? That game was a weird one because it seemed like Dallas really had a hold on that, a grasp on that game early.
They did, and the problem is Dallas's defense. They've got a great front seven. They're very good against the run. They can get pass rush pressure, and their secondary can get picks. But they keep reminding me of, I think I mentioned this last week, Lito Shepherd for the Eagles when he was in his prime. And yeah, he'd get interceptions, but he'd give up a ton of big plays too. And it was, where's the balance between them? I mean, there's a certain level at which you can give up big plays and picks can make up for it. But that's what the Dallas secondary is. They've got a lot of problems covering passes. So I think Washington was finally able to hit some big plays in them over the long haul. Losing McLaurin was big, though, too. I think that would have made a difference if he plays the whole game. But I think it said more about what Dallas is than what Washington is, because Washington is where they are, but Dallas should be an elite team right now, and they've got enough weaknesses where they aren't.
Yeah, the quarterback situation had Allen late in that game, but Heineke, he probably should be ready for next week. The Eagles seemingly have thrived against the lesser quarterbacks. Where is Heineke on the pantheon for you this year?
I keep coming back to, he reminds me of what Ryan Fitzpatrick was, where he's good in small doses, but if you have to take him as a quarterback for a steady dose for the entire season, you've got some problems. He'll make risky passes. He has looked I don't know if it's a durability issue or endurance issue, but he does look like he's worn down as the season's progressed. It could be just taking a beating as an NFL quarterback too. So I think that's a factor for him. And I think that their offense now is more, I think from the Eagles, I'm much more worried about Antonio Gibson, what they could do in the ground game, because when they had their bye week a few weeks ago, Antonio Gibson going in that had been battling a shin injury, and he'd been on the report every week, and his productivity was starting to level off as over the period of time. But once he got that week off, he's been very good since then. So if I'm the Eagles, I would be worried about stopping McLaurin, but my number one goal has got to be to keep Gibson in check because he's their offense.
Obviously, we'll take a deeper look at the matchup later on, but we're just kind of looking at what happened this week. And when you look at one thought on Dallas's offense, what's going on with Dak Prescott?
What's going on with Dak Prescott? He doesn't have the ground game he used to have. For one, you've got Zeke has a banged up knee. Obviously, Pollard wasn't in there because of the plantar fascia. They're just not the same. Corey Clement, you're giving him, they had 13 carries yesterday. You can't have him as one of your primary backs and expect that offense to go where it is. Plus, he makes too many risky passes. He's always done that. He's kind of like Mahomes, and the look. He's always taken a few more chances than people give him credit for. And mind you, hey, you want people to be aggressive. You want him, if you're Brett Favre, you want him to be aggressive. If you have certain quarterbacks, you want them to be aggressive. But I think it is a problem when you throw the interception to Cole Holcomb that puts Washington back in the game, and you've got to be careful about making those kinds of throws. So I think that is a big part of it, is that he wants to be more aggressive. I still don't think that they've figured out where they want to be in offense. I guess what I would boil it down to is that they want to be a passing game, but they want to be a running game, and then they wanted to run more this year, but they can't run more because their backs are too banged up. So I think they have some offensive identity issues that are causing him problems too.
Yeah, they got a bunch back, and you're up in that game. I don't know, did they take the foot off the gas a little bit? Were they a little too conservative? And then, once that game got a little tight, that interception he throws late in the game, I mean, holy mackerel, you're thinking, since that calf injury, he just hasn't looked the same.
No, he hasn't. That's a big part of it too, is that they've had the worst set of injuries because he gets the calf injury, Zeke has the knee, and now Pollard has the plantar fascia. And you go, okay, well, we've got the receivers to have an elite passing game, but our quarterback's too banged up. And we can't lean on our ground game to take some pressure off of him because our running backs are banged up. And normally, if you've got elite run blocking, you can get away with having just average backs. But I mean, even Dallas right now, I think they put so much into what they had in Pollard and Elliott that, I mean, Clement, again, he is what he is. You're going to be even if you give him great run blocking, you're going to be near the bottom of the league and how productive you are on those types of plays. And it looks like they lost Smith for their left tackle. They lost him again for this week too. So I think the Cowboys have a lot of problems. Yep. They're a flawed team.
But on the defensive side of the ball, it seems when they're healthy. I know you talk about Diggs earlier, and he takes a lot of chances, but getting Gregory and Lawrence back was a huge difference maker for them.
Yeah, it forces you. They now have the front seven that are going to win enough point of attack battles to where you're going to have to. You're not going to be able to just lean heavily on the ground game because if you can win one-on-one battles with your front seven, you can do whatever you want on defense. It's like if you got a great offensive line, you can just do whatever you want on offense. If you can win the one-on-one run blocking battles on defense, you can do basically whatever you want. So they've got a front seven now. They can really do that, and they can make you have to pass. And then you can start doing things where their cornerbacks can maybe take more chances and such. So it is a big plus for them. So when Philadelphia faces Dallas later this year, if Dallas has the same front seven in place, it's going to be a problem because whoever faces the Cowboys is going to have to throw the ball more. And if I'm the Cowboys, I kind of want to get back to that ball hawking ways that they had earlier this year. I want to let my cornerbacks take some chances and maybe put some pressure on the offense. But if they get a couple of picks, it turns the game around.
Yep. So there's you go. A little bit deeper thoughts on Dallas and Washington. Dallas wins 27-20 in that game. And now we got a 5-way logjam at 6-7 in the NFC wild card race. San Francisco won. We'll get to that. One thought every game. Let's do it. Casey Joyner. Baltimore loses again. Cleveland, they seemed like an afterthought. Now all of a sudden, it shows you how much it's a week-to-week league. One win for Cleveland has now kind of put them back in the playoff mix.
It has, and the thing about Cleveland is that they know what they want to be. We want to run the ball. We want to play good defense, and we want to be having an efficient passing game, and it's doing enough for them despite all their injuries. They're finding what many teams find. If you have that sort of setup, you can absorb a lot of injuries and still have had. Baltimore couldn't figure out what they wanted to be. Now they've got the quarterback problem, and their offense is not sure what they want to be there, and I think that's a big problem for them. Plus, the injuries on defense are just adding up for them.
Big time. All right, one thought every game. Jacksonville, Tennessee. I mean, Tennessee, everybody's kind of written them off until you put Jacksonville in front of you. That kind of keeps you back in the mix here. Jacksonville's got all sorts of off-the-field problems, but Tennessee gets a much-needed win on the field.
You're supposed to win those games, and that's what. Remember Buffalo a few weeks ago? That was where their season started to go south. Is that they didn't take Jacksonville seriously. Give Tennessee credit, that division foe, but still they took them seriously. They kept the foot on the gas, and they don't have much as far as offense goes. The leading rusher in the game is 447 yards on the ground. That was an ugly game, but that's exactly the kind of game that they needed to win. In Jacksonville, they're so far the worst team in the league. It's not even close for second place.
Real quick on them, I want to get your take on Trevor Lawrence and what you see from him. I mean, this was a can't miss guy, a guy that people thought it was worth tanking for. What is going on with Lawrence? Is he just in a bad situation, or is the hype? Does he not meet the hype?
I think it's a bad situation. I think you don't have the offensive talent around him. I think that the situation with the coaching situation is there. It's never a good sign when your coach and your quarterback seem to be when your quarterback is coming out and saying, "Yeah, I had to tell the coach I wanted to get our top running back into the game," and you've got the wide receiver having battles with coaches. I think all of that's just a horrible situation. You could have put Patrick Mahomes there to start his career, and he would have had just as bad of a start as Lawrence. So I'm not worried about his talent. You give him a better situation, he'll improve.
All right, one thought every game. Kansas City, 48, Vegas, 9. This looked, for the first time all year, this looked like the Chiefs, and that looked like the Raiders.
It did. We were talking last week that the Raiders, you never want to say a team is tanking on the season, but you could tell they're interested in getting to January 9th and being out of here. They really want this thing to be over. They wanted it. What Parcells said one time in a famous NFL Films clip, the other team is ready to quit, and all you got to do is give them a reason to. The Chiefs gave the Raiders a reason to quit very early that game, and the Raiders took them up on it.
All right, one thought every game. Let's go to New Orleans and the Jets. New Orleans, another team. People felt like they were out of this thing. One win puts them right back in. They're one of those 5, 6, and 7 teams, and Zach Wilson was an absolute disaster yesterday.
He is. I think Wilson is a guy who, remember, he only had, what was it, one season at BYU where it was against top-notch competition. I mean, so the guy really doesn't have very much development behind him. I think he's a guy who, if you could have sat him on the bench for a year or two behind a solid starter and let him develop, it would have been a perfect situation for him. Throwing him in the fire like this is a bad thing. Give Sean Payton credit, though. Whatever he is, what Bum Phillips used to say about Don Shirley, he could take his guys and beat yours and take your guys and beat his. That's what Sean Payton is. He'll find the best way to get his team to move, and he's found what that offense can do. So it makes the Saints a dangerous team.
One thought, every game, let's go to Atlanta and Carolina. You know, the winner of this game, they're in the mix. Atlanta, 6-7. The loser falls to 5-8. Atlanta, 29-21. You know, the Eagles saw the Falcons in week 1. They blow them away, and people were saying, it was only the Falcons. Well, they're 6-7. They're not great, but they're in this thing.
And they've got a solid coach. I mean, Smith is a good coach. I thought he wouldn't have to do much for this team for him to be a coach of the year candidate. He's obviously not going to win that, but to be able to win that game is a big plus for them. Getting, look, Ryan throws for 190 yards, but they got Patterson back. I wrote about it in my article today for The Athletic that they brought in Mike Davis. They're finally making those guys a platoon. So between Davis, Patterson, Pitts, Gage is a solid receiver. Ryan, they've got plenty enough on offense. And Carolina, their offense is just falling apart without McCaffrey because Newton just isn't it.
All right, one thought, every game. Seattle, they're back in this thing, 5-8. I mean, they're only a game out. They've won 2 in a row. They beat Houston, but things are starting to feel better there. Lockett's involved. Penny had a big day.
He did, and a lot of it probably has to do with Russell Wilson. When he hurt that finger, I think they said it was a 6 or 7 week time frame that was going to be okay.
Weeks.
Yeah. We're at that point now. We're at that 8-week point now to where, okay, this is where you would expect him. He rushed back, and when he came back, he wasn't the same quarterback because of that. Mind you, they're getting Lockett back in the game. DK Metcalf is doing terrible. I wrote about him in my article today with The Athletic and explained why. He just can't get open right now. But they've got Metcalf. They've got the ground game, and Houston is they're the second worst team in the league. Not as bad as Jacksonville, but the second worst. So that's a lot about Houston, but give Seattle credit.
I'll do my Fine 5, Ugly 5 on Wednesday. We'll see where those two teams rank for me. Casey Joyner is with me from The Athletic and the Philadelphia Inquirer. One thought, every game. Denver, they're in the mix on the AFC side of things. They get their 7th win of the year. Detroit had all sorts of roster problems, COVID and injuries, but Denver picks up a much-needed win at home.
Denver's a kind of a team to where if you give them a bad team like Detroit at home, they're going to do this. That's who they are. I think they were fired up too for with Demaryius Thomas passing away. Something like that can galvanize the stadium and galvanize the team. You could tell that they wanted to do something for him. But a lot of that again had to do with Detroit. Like you said, what do they have? 18 players, I believe it was, that were on the injury list on Friday, and for a variety of issues. And some of the players who weren't on the list had just gotten over illnesses last week too. So that has a lot to do with how Detroit faltered. All
right, one thought, every game. The Giants are just a disaster as well. There's some talk about, the coach, what's going to happen there. Gettleman, what's going to happen there. But the Chargers get a much-needed win as that kind of, that AFC, while as much as the NFC's got all sorts of wackiness, the AFC's got some crazy stuff happening too.
They do, and give the Chargers credit for being able to do it without Keenan Allen. Without Keenan Allen, such a central part of their offense wouldn't work. But Palmer and Guyton looked really good yesterday. And the Giants, the funny thing is that you talk about maybe moving Gettleman out. The idea of a general manager is to try to build a team and collect talent. And if you look at the talent they've collected, it's really good. They just haven't done much with it. And we don't know how good their team could have been had they been healthy because they can't keep anybody. The receiving core can never stay healthy for more than a week. So I feel bad for the Giants in that sense, but I bet they're going to make some changes.
Yeah, I don't know if they're still paying McAdoo, but I'm pretty sure they're still paying Shermer, right? This would be the third guy they would have to pay if they got rid of Joe Judge. And it just doesn't seem like the Giant way to keep going through coaches like this. But, man, it's been a mess out there. All right. San Francisco, Cincinnati. This had a little bit of a wonky call at the end of that game. And obviously Cincinnati gets to overtime. Burrow has a big game, but the 49ers get the win, and that win now puts them in sole possession of the 6th seed.
Yep, and San Francisco, they're a very good road team. They're 5-2 now on the road. I mean, they almost they're like the old Walsh 49ers, where they seem to do better away from home than they did there. So that's one reason I'm picking to win that game. And it's the thing is about Cincinnati is that they get all that offense together and they've got the big playability, but Mixon he was battling. He was out all last week due to a non-COVID illness. He didn't practice at all. He only got 58 yards on the ground. So I think that was a big part of it too. They had some injuries come in there, but you got to give San Francisco credit because Samuel goes ahead and plays. They're missing Mitchell, but they still found ways to get things done on the ground. I think that's a testament to what Kyle Shanahan can do when you give him some talent.
One thought, every game, and man, every game had some sort of meaning, it felt like, behind it, but maybe none bigger than Buffalo and Tampa. Tampa needed to keep pace for the number 1 seed. This game goes to overtime. They're down. Buffalo, they come roaring back in the game. They get it to overtime, and then, the officiating in that game was just horrendous. But Buffalo now, they went from a team that looked like a sure playoff team to, my gosh, they're the 7 seed right now, tied with 3 teams for that spot. This is going to be bonkers down the stretch in the AFC as well.
It is, and Buffalo, they don't do well. They don't want to get into shootout games. The shootout game is where each team scores 24 more points. That's not what they want to do. If you said going into this game, you said, "Hey, this is going to be a shootout contest," I take the Bucks 10 times out of 10. I had them win a game. I picked them to win the game, but like barely. I figured it'd be a really close game, and they had the game put away, and then Buffalo came back. But that's the thing. If you're Buffalo, you've got to find a way to stop getting into these contests. But think about Buffalo. They get into that slugfest with the Patriots. They can't win that kind of a game. They get into a shootout with Tampa. They can't win that kind of a game. So the Buffalo players are starting to wonder. You can get a sense from them like, hey, not that they're questioning their coach because he's a really good coach, but they're questioning, what do we got to do to get this fixed? Because everything we're trying isn't working and we can't win any style of game. So I think it's a problem for Buffalo. And I still think the Tre'Davious White injury is something that's really difficult for the defense to overcome.
Yeah, Tom Brady, touchdown number 700. Tom Brady, 363 yards. Tom Brady, most likely your MVP again. All right, one thought every game. I did a same-game parlay last night, and I hit 8 out of 9. The only one I didn't hit was the Bears freaking scored first. But then after that, they just couldn't hold on. There was a lot of back and forth in this game. Fun game offensively to watch, but too much Green Bay.
Surprising. It was a huge surprise because Green Bay's defense has been playing exceptionally well of late. I mean, really well, like top 5 in some metrics and such. But for Chicago to move the ball, it says to Chicago, hey, give Nagy credit. He's found a way to get that offense to move after early in the year. They were just awful. They're getting some things moving. They're getting some things done. But again, if you're Chicago, you don't want to get in the shootout with Aaron Rodgers. You're not going to win that, that's because their defense is not very good. So Chicago has to find a way to not get into those kind of games. But hey, in fact, this game is worse than it was the first time around because the first time I think they lost 24-14. So they tried a low-scoring game, it didn't work. They tried a high-scoring game, it didn't work. So I don't know what you do for Chicago. All
right, Casey Joyner, that's one thought every game. Tonight's game, very important in the NFC race. Arizona. Absekin's a city about 2 over from me right now. Arizona is trying to hold on to the number 1 seed. LA is trying to catch them. They got an outside shot at that. So big game Monday night. One thought on this game tonight.
Well, big COVID news is the first thought that comes up because Jalen Ramsey and Tyler Higbee are placed on the COVID-19 list. So they're out. You've got Havenstein, their tackles out. You've got Dante Diaz, one of their other cornerbacks, is out. I mean, they've got all kinds of problems when it comes to the COVID issues. I'm missing somebody else too. His name escapes me, but they've got all kinds of problems there. And I just don't think the Rams are not a team that likes to get in the slugfest. And I think the Cardinals will try to make them get in the win. The Cardinals did not activate Chase Edmonds today, so it's going to be Connor big time. But he's the kind of power back that I don't think the Rams do well against. And I think that the Cardinals will win that. They'll win a slugfest contest, and they'll make the Rams again question, hey, can we win these sorts of games? If they can't, it's going to be problems for them.
Yeah, this COVID is going to be very interesting the last month of the season here, Casey. I mean, Jonathan Allen, it looks like he has tested positive for COVID. He could miss the Eagles game on Sunday already. So as the calendar has flipped into December, we're seeing this COVID become a much bigger issue. This could really change the dynamics of the playoffs.
I think it's going to be, you're going to see a lot of the teams that have built for, Bill Belichick always says that the more adaptable you are. The less adaptable you are, the better it is. You have to be at whatever it is that you do well. Meaning, if you're a power running team and you can't power run for a game, you better have a plan B. Well, I think teams who are planned for plan Bs and plan Cs, both conceptually in their game plans and personnel wise, the teams that can do those and the teams that have the coaches that can make those sorts of adjustments are going to have a big edge the next 4 weeks. Because frankly, Adam Schefter reported today we're at 37 positive COVID cases. The COVID case numbers are moving up across the country. And I think we're going to see a lot of instances out of their last 4 weeks. And you're going to see the teams that can be adaptable and adjustable will be the teams that can get the wins.
All right. So, Casey, we're week 14 is almost done here. There is the AFC side of things. Indianapolis is currently number 6 at 7-6. I could try to make that a little bigger.
No, you're good. You're good.
And you got Indianapolis as the number 6 seed currently. You've got Buffalo as the 7 seed. You've got Cleveland, Cincinnati, Denver. Pittsburgh is there with that tie. Las Vegas, Miami. You have all the way down to the 13th spot. So, which of the AFC teams do you think are getting the wild card spots?
I'm going to go. The Colts have a really tough schedule. Okay, they've got New England this week. I believe they get Arizona, if I remember correctly. I mean, they've got a brutal schedule. They've got New England, Arizona, then the Raiders and the Jags. I think they'll beat the Raiders and the Jags. I think they'll get one win against either the Patriots or the Cardinals. So I'm going to put them in as the next team in. And if I had to pick from the rest, I'm probably still going to pick Buffalo from a talent perspective, but it won't surprise me if Cleveland passes them.
Watch out for that Miami team too, by the way.
Yes.
They're very interesting. All right, let's scroll down to the NFC side of things. You got San Francisco at 7-6, Washington 6-7, Minnesota 6-7, Philadelphia 6-7, Atlanta 6-7, New Orleans 6-7, Carolina and Seattle both 5-8. So, who right now? You got 4 weeks. Everybody's got the buys are over. Down the stretch they come. Who are the NFC wildcard teams?
Well, I like the Eagles. I've been saying this in my articles. As long as they lean on the ground game, as long as they keep going in that direction, because I think they'll beat the Giants. I think they'll win at least one against Washington. I honestly think they have a very good chance of beating the Cowboys in Week 18. I think they've got a very good chance of that because the Cowboys are such a flawed club. That's it. The Eagles will keep running the ball. Caveat that. If they start throwing the ball, forget about it. But I'll take them in there. And I would probably also take, I would probably say Minnesota's playing the best out of that bunch. If you look at their metrics, playing the best, but they can't seem to obviously win the games they're supposed to win. So I think the Niners will be 6, and I'll take the Eagles at 7.
All right. Obviously, Philly and Washington this week. Philly and Washington again in 3 weeks from now. Well, 2 weeks from now. Washington plays Dallas again next week after the Philly game. So Washington, who knows, man? Can they go down to Dallas and get a win after losing here? There will so much to be determined. I guess this is what the NFL wants. They want just a bunch of, is it parity or mediocrity or both?
I think the NFL, it used to be back in the day. I mean, I'm going to date myself here, but if you go back to the 70s and 80s, especially in the 70s, I was a kid then, but if you go back and look in the 70s, the NFL would have only 4 playoff teams from each league, or in each conference. So you would have, the competition would be, can you get to the number one? That's what you were fighting for. Was it the 3 division championships, and then there was 1 wildcard team? And they added a wildcard team that seemed to help. But now it's like so much attention is being paid to these 6, 7, 8, and 9 seed teams, and that's nice, and it helps keep more teams into the mix. I would rather be paying more attention to who's going to be able to get a first round bye, or who the top teams are, because we're kind of giving those teams the afterthought. And now we're going to be spending all these 4 weeks paying attention to. We really want Atlanta to be the team we're thinking about in Week 18. It doesn't seem like a good idea.
Or Philadelphia, or New Orleans, or Minnesota, or Washington. They're all in the mix. But you're right, because the 1 seed on both sides still up for grabs. And people forget, with the 7th team, the 1 seed is the only team getting the bye now. It makes it a lot more important. All right, Casey Joyner's back for one thought on every Week 15 game on Friday night, as the Eagles will take on Washington on Sunday. We'll talk more about that game then. Casey Joyner, good to see you, man.
Appreciate it, man. Talk to you.
Check out all of his coverage in The Athletic and the Philadelphia Inquirer, and follow him on Twitter at KC Joyner, TFS for the football scientist. All right, when we come back, we're going to go inside the NFC East a little deeper, the NFC playoff race. Jeff Kerr from CBS Sports covers the NFL. We'll take a look at what storylines he saw yesterday. He was covering the Cincinnati San Francisco game. So we'll get his thoughts on that game as well, plus tonight's game, the impact of all the games. Casey Joyner is brought to you by Cape Regional Health Systems. For a healthier life, call 609-463-CAPE. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash. Follow me on Twitter at Mike Gill Show. Do that right now at Mike Gill Show on Twitter. And then, of course, you could download the free mobile app in the Apple Store or Google Play. It's free thanks to First Bank of Sea Isle. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app, and streaming live video on the 97.3 ESPN YouTube channel. 5:31 on a Friday night. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. I'm Mike Gill. Follow me on Twitter at Mike Gill Show. And, of course, download the free mobile app at the Apple Store or Google Play. It's free thanks to First Bank of Sea Isle. Sports Bash is brought to you by Deborah Heart and Lung Center. When it's your heart, you don't take chances. Be sure. DemandDeborah.org. A busy week coming up for us. Tonight we've got Sixers in Memphis, 8 o'clock on 97.3 ESPN. Tomorrow, we've got the Flyers back in action, taking on the Devils. And the Flyers, by the way, have won 2 games in a row. Wow, wow, wow. How about that? Turning things around. You know, Vancouver fired their coach, Bruce Boudreau, came in. He's won 4 in a row. So the new coach seems to be working in the NFL. The NHL. The Flyers fire their coach, and Mike Yale is, 2-2? I think he lost his first 2 games, and then he's won his last 2 games. So the Flyers play the Devils tomorrow night. Sixers play the Heat on Wednesday night. What do you got?
I was going to say the Flyers situation is also a bizarre circumstance because you lost 2 games where you looked like absolute garbage on the ice, and you go to Vegas, beat them. They're one of the best teams in the NHL in their house. Then you go down the road to Phoenix, who's a dumpster fire of an organization right now, and you just take advantage of them at their worst possible moment in time.
Yeah, I was watching, obviously, the Sixers game on Saturday night. That was an 8:30 game. The Flyers game was a 9 o'clock game.
Right.
So the Sixers game ends, and I flip over to the Flyers. Hey, look at this. The Flyers are going to win 2 in a row on back-to-back. You're on a back-to-back on the road, which is like, that's not normal to win in that situation for a team that's lost 10 in a row, and they come out and win both of them.
Phoenix, for those who don't know the story, Durst and I talked about a little bit on Friday's show on game night, but basically they were behind on their tax bill and on their rent for the building they're in. And they were threatened with eviction and to be brought to court by the state if they didn't pay their bills. They finally paid their bills, but apparently players were like, are we going to get paid? So there's a whole mess of things going on.
There's talk about them leaving Arizona. The owner has come out and said they're not leaving. Right. You mentioned the building. I guess they owe rent on the building. They could be evicted from their own home.
Well, they did get up to date. That is the official news that came out recently. But the problem, Mike, is that, apparently they want to move to Tempe. They want to get out of.
Isn't the building they're in new?
It's newer than other arenas, but they want a new arena.
Everybody does. God's sakes.
They for some reason think that having a bad hockey team but having a new building is going to change attendance, but
yeah,
whatever.
So that's on. So the Sixers are playing the Heat on Wednesday night. So we got Sixers tonight, Flyers tomorrow, Sixers on Wednesday. Thursday, it's Sixers Nets. So the Sixers have this Memphis team. This Memphis team might be one of the 5 best teams in the league.
They're dangerous.
They are very really good, and they're winning without Ja Morant.
Yeah, Dylan Brooks, when he came back, he lit a fire under them on the court. And then, of course, Jaren Jackson's healthy again. They're a fun young team.
They are, and you'll see that tonight. Sixers have their hands full tonight with this Memphis team. Then they play the Heat on Wednesday night. We know the Heat are solid, and then they play the Nets. They play the Nets on Thursday night. So they got the back-to-back Heat and Brooklyn. Not an easy situation. I would say this. The Kyrie stuff is going to be interesting because I think Kyrie was just holding out that the vaccine stuff would loosen. That's not going to happen.
Well, it depends on which reporting you want to believe. Obviously there's reporting that says that, Kyrie was taking this position because he was trying to take a position with the Players Association against mandates. If you want to believe that theory, good for you. There's another theory out there that apparently Kyrie has been waiting for a plant-based vaccine because he's not a fan of the way they make these vaccines. There's another theory out there. So it kind of depends on who you want to believe, but I do generally believe that I don't think Kyrie is sitting out just for the sake of sitting out. There's a lot of word out there that he's out there working very hard. And, when he comes back, he's not going to be like Zion Williamson having to get back in shape.
Well, the problem I think with Kyrie has been he was just waiting. He thought, as many people just thought this thing was going to kind of just evaporate and go away. and that, hey, the league would say, okay, we're past the point now where you need to be vaccinated to actually play.
Right.
Look, I don't know that anybody saw this today. It kind of got swept under the rug a little bit, but starting January 3rd, to go to a Sixers or Flyers game, you are going to have to prove that you are vaccinated.
Yeah, and that's something that the city themselves makes a designation, just like New York City. It's not a state
Right.
rule; that's a specific in-city rule. So
that would, if the fans have to be vaccinated, does that mean the player would also have to be?
well, I understand the rule for New York City is
I know in
if
New
you
York
are-
you have to be.
well, if you're in New York, if you're a visiting player, you don't have to be vaccinated. You have a rule as an out of the city employee exemption, basically.
Mm.
So but that's part of the problem, Mike. These rules are different from city to state, and that's the biggest problem with all this. There's no consistency in the application of the rules, and people are just doing whatever they think is best, and there's no uniformity or conversation about whether what they're doing is right or wrong. They're just, well, we're doing what we think is best, and you can literally drive 20 minutes away and be completely different set of rules.
Jeff Mosher was on for Football at 4 today, and what did he say? He said, look, the Eagles are coming off of a bye week, and they're scattered all over the country, and they've already got 2 guys on the COVID list.
Right.
Adam Schefter reported, earlier this afternoon, 37 positive COVID tests today, and it's already affecting stuff all over the league, including tonight's game.
Correct.
I mean, Jalen Ramsey's out tonight.
And Tyler Higbee. You got
Jeez.
two players who have been important parts of your team.
By the way, it's affecting the Eagles game on Sunday because Jonathan Allen, tested positive.
Well, here's the other problem with this. So there are certain people who are getting false positives again. We're running into this problem. This is what LeBron was screaming about a couple of weeks ago, about the fact that he's been vaccinated.
Jeez.
He tested positive. He had 8 consecutive negatives, so they actually let him back on the court.
This is another thing where you talk about, I don't want my team making the playoffs. You have no idea what these playoffs are going to look like.
I don't. I know I certainly don't.
Right?
Because who knows what the world's going to be like by then? This stuff seems to change week to week, month to month.
I'll tell you what, I have no guess, answer, or thought on the whole situation. Like, to me, it is one of the most unpredictable things in this season is that you never know who's going to be ready to play week to week with this stuff, especially as we get deeper and deeper and deeper into the wintertime.
And guess what? Part of the problem for these leagues is that, and I'm not trying to take a position because that's not I'm just giving out information here, but look at a team like the Calgary Flames right now. So they had to shut down the Chicago Bulls. Those are 2 teams that are saying, look, you got too many COVID situations. We're going to shut you down for a few games, postpone, right? Well, the rules and regulations for the players in Canada with Calgary are way more stringent than it is for the Bulls in Chicago. But they both have the same problem.
Hudrick just say about, playing in Toronto?
Well, starting in January, if you are unvaccinated, you can't go to Toronto.
Yep.
Period. There's no and if or but around it. So guess what? If you're the Washington Wizards, guess who can't go with you? Bradley Beal.
Bobby Marks and Kevin Pelton over at ESPN.com debated or discussed, I guess. I don't think they debated, like there wasn't an angry debate here. 3 options for the Sixers to trade Ben Simmons. The first one was for Brandon Ingram. Okay.
Which is interesting because he was the guy picked right after Ben Simmons.
Mm-hmm. And they went back and forth on on how negotiations would go there. The other one was Sabonis.
I mean, you and I talked about Sabonis last week about, the positives and negatives that would come with that.
And then the third one was CJ McCollum.
Honestly, I like McCollum a lot, but I think this whole lung situation, you just have to count him out altogether.
Well, Pelton has said what I've been saying, that the play of Maxey and Curry has made trading for McCollum a less attractive option. Like, it's a repetitive player.
Right. You're basically getting a guy you already have.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're ready to give up on Maxey and say, look, let's squeeze him out to get a more accomplished player. I mean, McCollum's more accomplished than Maxey is, but at this point, I'd rather just have Maxey. He's younger. His upside's higher.
When you look at, and obviously there's a lot of names that have been thrown out by a lot of people, is there a player at this point that you genuinely, when you hear that name, that you're just like, you know what? Yes, is at all? Or do you feel like there's a lot of names being thrown out and you're just kind of like shrugging your shoulders on them?
I haven't seen a player yet that I'm like, that's the guy. That's the perfect move. Let's make this happen. No, I haven't seen one.
So whether it's Sabonis or Karis LeVert or
Karis
DeJounte
LeVert's a
Murray-
player that I like, but he's not. I don't think Daryl Morey will do him as the centerpiece of a deal.
No, but I mean, like, these are players who could be acquired in a lot of these said scenarios. Is just what I'm throwing out there. You know, obviously, there's De'Aaron Fox and Buddy Hield. I think part of the problem for me, Mike, is I can see where some of these players would help the Sixers, but I'm not really sure that any of the guys who are out there are going to, really come in here and do something that you don't already have.
Yeah.
Like, I like the idea of DeJounte Murray coming in here. He kind of can be a lesser version of Ben Simmons. But then what happens? Tyrese Maxey goes to the bench, right? Then you get a little, your team already looks different at that point. If you bring in, let's say the Sixers came away with this deal with De'Aaron Fox and Buddy Hield, for example. Well, it gets back to what we said about Seth Curry and Tyrese Maxey. Isn't Buddy Hield basically another version of Seth Curry?
Yeah. I mean, well, yes, not a good defensive player who shoots well.
Right. So, okay, those are two more guys who are redundant.
Yeah.
Okay, if you acquire Sabonis, well, what do you do with Tobias Harris? You acquire Karis LeVert. Does that mean Danny Green comes off the bench? There's so many of these scenarios. Even the situation that I brought up on Saturday's show, which is I said, look, I guarantee you, if the Timberwolves called the Sixers and said, you interested in Anthony Edwards and the Ben Simmons trade, they would say absolutely yes. But even then, Anthony Edwards is going to make your offense better, but your defense pretty much is the same.
Yeah. Well, and I think he gives you a scorer though that you don't have. Hield is a repetitive scorer.
Mm-hmm.
Edwards would be a scorer that you don't have.
Right, he can create his own shot.
Yes.
But then what happens? So is your starting lineup Maxey, Edwards, Curry in your backcourt?
Maxey, Edwards, that's a small backcourt.
Because, I mean, you're already starting Danny Green, and I think Edwards is, an inch or two taller than him?
Well, if you gave me Edwards, I'd take him. I mean, I'm not going to – I mean, at this point, he would be the best player that I've heard that you would say – I don't even think he's available, by the way.
Well, the only reason I keep throwing his name out
he's
there.
He's a small forward, though. I mean, he's a forward
who's
small.
Exactly. But no, I keep bringing his name up is because, everything coming out of Minnesota is that Minnesota has to make a decision because their new ownership wants to overhaul the culture of the franchise. And I can't see a scenario where Minnesota, they're serious.
Was the new ownership in place when the draft was around? Like, did they have any?
No, they were still negotiating the terms. But the new ownership is the reason why they got fined. Remember they got fined recently?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they had guys going
Pete Thompson.
Hey,
Hi, it's Pete Thompson.
He's wearing his it's not actually a Nebraska red, but it is red like Nebraska.
U.S. Open.
That's right. There you go. But anyway, so basically, the A-Rod, after they made the team acquisition deal, he brought all the guys down the floor to work out with him. And they got fined for it.
All right, 546, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Sports Bash brought to you by the 2022 Hercules Tires MAAC Basketball Championships. They're heading to Atlantic City's Jim Whalen Boardwalk Hall, March 8th through the 12th. Visit boardwalkhall.com for tickets and info. This is the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app, and streaming live video on the 97.3 ESPN YouTube channel.
In 3, 2, and 1. Hey, it's Pete Thompson. Join me at the Byright Williamstown Friday, the 17th. Do I date it? Or just say this Friday?
This Friday.
Okay. Hi, it's Pete Thompson. Join me at the Byright Williamstown this Friday in Monroe Township for Screwball Peanut Butter Whiskey. The event's 6:30 to 7:30, but you can get a free taste of Screwball from 5:30 to 7:30. Plus, you have a chance to win some Flyers tickets, New Jersey Lottery tickets, tickets to MAAC basketball at Boardwalk Hall. Come out and see me, Pete Thompson, for Screwball Peanut Butter Whiskey at the Byright in Williamstown. Tonight, Friday. You can piece that together, right? Maybe. All right, you want to do another one? In 3, 2, and 1. Hey, it's Pete Thompson. Join me at Joe Canals in Millville for Screwball Peanut Butter Whiskey. I'll be there from 12 noon to 1. The tasting runs from 11 to 1. Come out and get a free taste of Screwball, plus a nice Screwball t-shirt, and you have the chance to win a pair of Flyers tickets. It's Screwball Peanut Butter Whiskey. Smooth finish, creamy peanut butter flavor. Trust me, you want to spend some time with Screwball, it'll definitely get you nutty. That's Screwball Peanut Butter Whiskey, and I'm Pete Thompson. I'll be at Joe Canals in Millville. Join me Saturday, tonight.
.551 as we get ready to wrap up a Monday show. Pete Thompson, what are you doing in these neck of the woods?
Surprise visit. I had to go get my Christmas sweater. You know, Christmas Eve, I got to have a new sweater. So I was in the area at a local clothing establishment and
nice.
Said, you know what? I'll just go over and see my boy Mike Gill and see how he's doing.
Well, it's good to see you.
Thank you. Yeah, not on a StreamYard, like in person. Here I am.
Yeah.
Now, what did I just say to you? I said, hey, Josh Allen might be hurt. That's the problem. And then I thought about it. I go, wait a second. I think you beat Billy.
Yeah, and I said I changed my lineup for the first time all year.
Right. You were like 1-10 or something. Or I mean, you had one.
I looked at, first off, I
one win.
I did. I was 1-12. I looked at my lineup and I said, how the hell's my team 1-12?
Right.
I had a great team. I have Aaron Rodgers. I have like Justin Jefferson.
But if you don't it's like a lawn. If you don't water it, it's going to turn brown.
True,
I mean,
true. I mean,
there's certain house plants you could just like set it and quit it. But I mean,
my team was loaded. If I didn't even realize, like, I don't know, man. I forget to change my roster. I'm a bad owner in that league. I beat Kevin McCormick.
Now I did
161 although it's not over yet. There's a game tonight. Oh, I have one guy. He has two.
So, but are you going to win?
I don't know. It's a very close game.
Oh, I did play this week. I played a certain Cowboys fan in the building, or you know who I'm talking about,
Yep.
who went to Landover, went to FedEx Field. So, played a kicker that was not kicking.
Oh, I see.
Right?
I have Aaron Rodgers, Dalvin Cook, Austin Eckler, Kareem Hunt. Now, Eckler, Hunt, and Cook were all injured for a while.
Yeah.
I have DK Metcalf, who hasn't been very good this year.
I love that you're
I
just
have
sort of
CD
rediscovering your own team.
Right? I have CD Lamb, who was hurt a lot this year. I have Jamar Chase, too, for God's sake.
Could you please comment on a man that has the team name Amari Had a Little Lamb, and then he didn't start Amari Cooper this Sunday?
Ooh.
That's a party foul.
Yeah, no, I'm a bad owner in this league. I admit it. But I also say, see, I'm the anti-Pete Thompson. I joined the league because I don't want the league not to exist.
That was nice of you. Yeah, you remember that year that I didn't join the league, and
right?
You've never let me forget about it. Oh, he had the Miami kicker, Sanders. He had the Miami kicker. So I texted said individual and said, first of all, like I thought out my text. I said, first of all, your team name is Amari Had a Little Lamb, and you put the guy on the bench. I said, secondly, you're playing a kicker on a bye. Are you mailing it in or what?
Yeah.
And he writes back and says, sorry, I'm a little inebriated right now. I was at the game. so I can understand that.
How'd you spend the bye week, Peter?
I spent it working. I was at where were we? We were at Rack's Pub in Atco on Friday night, and then on Saturday night Saturday afternoon we were at the Roger Wilco in Pennsauken. Funny thing about that one is, like, I'm driving there and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, I've been here before. You ever get that feel? Well, no, you never drive, but I was getting that feeling like, hey, wait a second, I've covered. Well, you're always the passenger when it's you and me. Pennsauken played Atlantic High one time on a Saturday in football, and I was up there for a playoff game. And so this Roger Wilco essentially shares the parking lot with Pennsauken High.
Wow.
So you're like,
if tailgating area.
you're skipping class, then you just go down and get a few pops and make sure there's Screwball peanut butter whiskey.
That's right. So you're going to be with Screwball again this weekend.
Yeah.
You got a nice little run.
Yeah, I mean, this is going all right. Leanne and I are figuring out how to do it. We're having a good time. I get a little taste. Now you said bananas. I had it with cranberry on Friday night. That was like a peanut butter and jelly. And then what they did Saturday was they had some homemade fudge, and they mixed it with fudge. So it was kind of like chocolate and peanut butter. Obviously that goes together.
Yeah, we have a mutual friend who reached out to me and heard me talking about the banana liqueur and said he wants to know where he can get it.
The banana liqueur?
Yeah.
You can't get it at most liqueur.
I would imagine you could.
I would imagine so. I mean, you could try the Buy Right in Williamstown, where I'll be on Friday, or you could try the Joe Canals in Millville, where I'll be on Saturday.
Oh, nice. All right.
Well, I feel like Joe Isuzu. Yeah, I just stopped in, so trust me.
Flyers on a 2-game win streak.
Is that unbelievable or what?
Sixers looking to win a third. What's that?
They play Memphis tonight.
Yeah. Oh, no, they lost to the Jazz.
Yeah, but I don't care about the win streak. I just care about I have to stay up later.
8 o'clock start on 97.3 ESPN.
I'll be listening.